repeat that just to make sure that everybody's got me at the beginning of the show. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our live stream. In the build-up to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, sounds dramatically exotic, doesn't it? Well, it is, down the strip there at night. The only Grand Prix that starts on a Saturday, admittedly a Saturday night, so it doesn't really stand up to comparisons with history, but the first one that starts on a Saturday, speaking of the calendar, since the 74 South African Grand Prix in Kyalami, won by Carlos Reutemann, his first Grand Prix win in a Brabham BT44 beautiful Gordon Murray design. Anyway, I digress. Welcome again to the live feed. This is your opportunity, hopefully, to ask a few questions, make a few comments, express your opinion, whatever, and I'll be doing my best to air all those and to give you a shot. I've got a little bit of a program lined up as well, so we'll go into that at various stages, but I think let's just start with a few questions as we normally do, and as I normally always make a slight mess up of trying to get the box onto the actual screen. I think I can do it now, just about. Let's have a look. The browser is here. Here we go. Right. This is from, first of all, Lee Kambanga says, hi, Peter. Thank you very much, Lee. Hi to you. And now Tyre Straits says, hi, Peter. As you saw coming, well, thank you very much. Formula One is exploring measures against teams, in inverted commas, well, Haas and other, I guess, inverted commas, outsourcing most of their parts to other manufacturers and not getting political. But the upcoming Trump tariffs may have an effect on Haas working with Dallara and Toyota too. Are the Haas Formula One teams' days numbered now? It's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of, I hadn't thought about it at all in terms of Trump and those tariffs. And I still don't know if they'll actually go through with that, because there seem to be so many of economists who are saying if you do that, it's going to bring down the US economy. So I think the jury's out on whether they'll actually go through on that tariffs thing. It just, in my opinion, it was probably quite a simple thing to say at the time to get the job done in terms of moving on to the next question from the interviewer. And tariffs, a nice word that means money, and get rid of tariffs means we're getting rid of paying tariffs. Sounds good, doesn't it? I don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, as far as the other point's concerned, yeah, it's not before time either. I think that they should be looking at this ridiculous thing, Haas having connections now with, at the moment, Dallara, Toyota, and and Ferrari too, obviously. And that's, to me, that doesn't comply with the essence of Formula One's DNA, which is that in order to enter the World Championship, even, let alone compete, you have to design and build your own car. That's still the premise of what makes Formula One different from any other category of motorsport in the world. And it also is the reason that the current team owners can ask or imagine such exorbitant numbers for the value of their so-called franchise. In other words, the sky's the limit if it's the right buyer, which is why Michael Andretti quite sensibly isn't going to try and buy one of the existing teams for the moment. I think they just they go up and up and up on a ludicrous scale, I think. So yeah, I mean, if you strip off all the outside supply work from Haas, you've basically got a race team with some good designers, good management, good engineers, good drivers, but you don't have all the infrastructure you need in order to design and build your own car. That's very clear. And yeah, the dispensation in my mind with Haas was given in its first year. They were given a lot of lead-up time, first of all, and secondly, to make things easy, we're going to do it with Dallara. And I think the implication always was that they were going to then design and build their own car after a year or two. But isn't it time that we moved on from that? So yeah, I'm pleased to see that, and I think that should be something that's quite vehemently enforced, I think, in the short term even. So thank you for that question, Tyre Straits. Well, comment really, I think, but good point. Sarosh Soman. Hi, Peter. I thought Leclerc drove a good race in Brazil, given how difficult the car was to drive. He defended against Max well. Sainz was nowhere in the Ferrari, and in those conditions, your thoughts? Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a difficult circuit for Ferrari anyway, just as I think Qatar will probably be Qatar will be a difficult circuit for Ferrari. But I think Vegas and Abu Dhabi will be good circuits for Ferrari. But Brazil was never going to be one of their great tracks. And that showed, I think, wet or dry, with Leclerc sort of struggling with the car a little bit less, what's the right word? With less fuss than Carlos Sainz, who with his slightly more open corner approaches and feel for the rear, not so much the front, it was always going to be difficult for him on a bumpy surface on that sort of layout. And if you then throw the water in, the rain, as I said in the videos, you know, that rain highlighted quite a lot of drivers who don't drive at the front end of the car. And that it wasn't only Carlos Sainz, that was always going to be the case, but Alex Albon is another. And interestingly, so is the great Franco Colapinto, about which has been so much has been said. But that, you know, that showed him up, as I've been saying since I first saw him in the car, that he does drive at the back end of the car rather than the front. So any comparison with Carlos Reutemann, forget it, because Carlos was totally, you know, front end Max Verstappen style. So yeah, and that did highlight it. But yeah, and we know that about Carlos, and that is one of his. You could say one of his failings. You could say also it's one of his characteristics, because that doesn't always catch him out. You know, as we saw in Mexico, he's pretty difficult to beat when things are right. So yeah, you know, it wasn't a great circuit for him. But I think he'll probably go pretty well in Vegas, as I say. I think Ferrari will in general. I think they'll be hard to beat in Vegas, to be honest. But thanks for that question. Right, try not to let this chat box get ahead of me, but anyway, we'll see how. Here we go. M.A. Khan. Hello, M.A. Khan. You're a regular, I know. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Peter. Was Nigel Mansell adaptable like Max, or only quick in great cars? Lewis, for me, is as good as Max when the car suits him, but maybe not as adaptable. Who was Mansell more like, Max or Lewis? Oh, no. I mean, Lewis, I think you're being hard on Lewis, because it's a 7 World Championship Lewis you're now judging in a bad car. And I think Lewis in a bad car year 4, it'd be a different Lewis to the one you're seeing now. Not a lot different, but it'd be different. Going on to Nigel, he drove bad cars incredibly well. Nobody noticed it. Nobody talked about it. And a very good example of that was the 85 Portuguese Grand Prix in the wet, the streaming rain in which Ayrton Senna won his first race. Massive publicity around Senna for that win. But Nigel started from the pit lane in a car that Keke Rosberg, whose car control was pretty good, I've got to tell you, found virtually undrivable. It was when there was horrendous throttle lag on that Williams FW10 Honda. And it was just like a knife edge throttle application. It was either full power or nothing at all. And eventually it caught Keke out in the race. And Nigel went off on the formation lap, just trying to get the tyres warm and just trying to be normal with the car, and went off and hit the guardrail. And obviously Patrick Head very annoyed. They did the quick repair. It was the front wing, I think, from memory. And he started from the pit lane. And bear in mind, Ayrton had a pretty clear track, which he deserved, fair enough. Nigel drove through the field to finish 5th. And he was never in clear air or water at any stage in an undrivable car. To me, that was maybe the best Grand Prix drive of Nigel's career, but very few people talk about it. So there you go. That wasn't a great car. And car engine package, but it was just a sensational drive. I would put it right up there with Senna's on the day. And that was the moment when quite clearly Nigel in a very good car was going to win a bundle of races, and obviously a world championship if that could come with it. So yeah, Nigel always gave 100% in whatever he was in. And I don't know if I've told you this, I've related this story before on the live stream, but I'm going to tell it again because it kind of answers your question as well. And that was the Formula 3 race at Thruxton with Rob Wilson taking part. 1978. No, 1980. And Nigel's in the uncompetitive March 803, which he's only got for a third of the year, even though I did a deal with March to run the full season. But anyway, there you go. And the rest of the year was going to be with free Renault engines, which I'd got from Renault. I'd negotiated that deal for Nigel. And when Robin heard heard about it, he said, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, that'll really, we don't need to find the budget there after that. You give us the free engines." And then behind my back, he went to Renault and said, "We don't want Mansell. We want this deal, but we don't want Mansell as a driver." And Renault, to their credit, Gerard Leroux said, "Well, in that case, we don't want to work with March." And I always respected Gerard a lot for that, and I still like him very much as a person as a result. Anyway, getting back to the story, that year, Nigel and Rob qualified near one another on the grid, but it wasn't on the front row, that's for sure. And it was wet, it had been raining, and it was now a drying track, but there was standing water everywhere, particularly out the back. And on the opening lap, Nigel and Rob both went through the standing water around the back on the quick corner, top gear, and both had massive spins, almost in sort of, perfect timing, spinning together through the grass, didn't hit anything solid, and rejoined at the back of the grid, back of the race. And Rob was just in front of Nigel. And it wasn't a long race. It was a British Formula 3 Championship round. It wasn't that long a race. And they both had no option but just to drive through the field and get the best finish they could, obviously, at that point. So Rob was leading Nigel through this entire race. And they get to the last lap, and they're sort of 8th place by now. Nigel's right behind Rob. And there was standing water out the back. And every lap, obviously, after what happened on the first lap, Rob and Nigel, like everybody else, had been going around the outside of the standing water a little bit off the racing line to avoid it, right on the inside of this very, very quick, bumpy right-hander. And on the last lap, Rob does his normal thing, just misses the standing water, and Nigel just goes straight through the standing water, full lock, opposite lock, in top gear, and manages to hold the car and beats Rob to the checkered flag. And Rob thinks to himself, if that guy wants 8th place that badly, he's for sure going to win a world championship. And, it kind of, even now, makes the hairs stand up on my arm telling that story, because it's true. And that is the sort of burning ambition that Mario Andretti always used to talk about, and still does really probably, that you need to be a winning racing driver. And that's what Nigel always had. So yeah, when you asked me, was Nigel good in uncompetitive cars? Boom! I got a million stories I can tell you in saying how good he was. Yeah, definitely in the Max Verstappen mold. But I wouldn't in any way disparage Lewis's ability to do the same, because you're judging Lewis now. If you're saying, well, he's not as good as George or whatever you want to say, you're judging him in a completely different situation where he's got absolutely no reason to prove himself, and knows that when he's in a quick car, he can win Grand Prix and World Championships again. And he's obviously not very happy now, these last few races at Mercedes. Why would he be? And I can predict it now. I was out walking Dexter this morning. I was thinking, in terms of obvious dumb questions that are going to come up over the winter, if there's a scenario where in the tests at the beginning of next year, the new Mercedes is really quick, and all of a sudden George is quickest in testing and Antonelli's right behind him, or maybe even quicker or whatever, and the Ferrari's not very good, you can imagine a lot of people are going to be saying to Lewis, "Oh, what do you think about Mercedes? Do you think it's going to be, do you think you made a mistake?" and all this stuff. And of course Lewis won't care at all. He'll say the right thing, which is, "Oh, I'm really happy for the guys. It's great for them. They work really hard. Don't worry, we're okay." And he'll be completely happy, because he knows that at Ferrari he's going to have a reasonable car, at least 50% of the time, hopefully 75% of the time, and he'll be getting on with it. But, all those questions are totally predictable, aren't they? M.A. Khan says, "Peter, you've made me a Jim Clark convert." Oh, that's very nice to hear. "The more I read about him, the more I think he is the GOAT." Well, that's good to hear, the greatest of all time. "Please tell us more about Spa 63. I can't believe he won by such a distance. How did he do it?" Well, part of the reason he was able to do that, he qualified on the, from memory, 3rd row, which is actually a long way back then, because it was certainly a 3-2-3 grid, might even have been 4-3-4. No, it's probably 3-2-3. And he was on the 3rd row, and because he'd had lots of dramas in practice, as they were at Lotus at that point. And Trevor Taylor had a massive shunt in practice in the Lotus 25 as well. So the team was in a bit of a shambolic state. And actually on that one, I remember Trevor telling me that, I think it was Bob Dance told him afterwards, sort of weeks after the shunt, that they were changing the rear suspension or something on Trevor's car in the pit lane. It was definitely the back end of the car. And Colin Chapman was getting more and more wound up about how long this suspension change was taking. And at one point, when the sort of four wheels were on the car and the car was on the ground, he said, go on, get out, send him out, get him out now. We've only got 5 minutes to go, whatever it was. And so he went out. And as he went out, Bob, I don't think Bob was the chief mechanic, probably Cedric Seltzer actually, said, who sent Trevor out? And they said, well, Colin sent him out. I said, well, there's no bolt through the top of the union of the rear of the wishbone to the upright. Of course, massive shunt as a result. Not the first time that sort of thing happened at Lotus, I'm afraid. Anyway, as the backdrop of all that, Jimmy didn't qualify very well. And so he started with almost full right lock on the car, and he knew that it was going to be difficult to pass people in the rain. So he just said, right, I've got to try and get the lead before Eau Rouge. This downhill start into Eau Rouge, of course, not the one they have now. And he made a perfect start and just passed everybody on the outside. And he was leading, I think. I think he was leading or P2 going into Eau Rouge. And then, job done. I mean, Jimmy was unbelievable in the wet. And there was nothing else to that race other than the brilliance of Jim Clark and how well he drove. It wasn't the 65 race, which is also in the wet, which actually is probably even a better drive, because that was the one where the car was jumping out of gear and he had to hold it in gear going through the master kink because it kept popping out of fifth and jumping into fourth and things like that in the wet, which you don't want. And probably popping into neutral or something like that. Anyway, because the car was sliding a lot, and he was always an opposite lock, four-wheel drift, going through master kink in the wet, flat out. He had his hand, because he had to do it one-handed, he put the hand in the position it was going to need to be in to get the right amount of opposite lock one-handed while holding the gear lever with the other hand. All these kids today with paddle shifts and, nothing, is it? When you think about what they had to do back then. So, that 63 win. I was trying to think if that was probably Jimmy's first big... he'd driven brilliantly in the wet in the 62 German Grand Prix as well, when he made a mistake on the grid and forgot to switch the fuel pump on and drove a really good race through the field. And that was his first big Formula One. He had something in England in the non-championship. He'd been very good in the wet in Formula One, but that was the sort of first time, wow, Clark is good in the wet. And then this 63 Belgian was, astronomically good. So there you go. How did he do it? Well, pure natural talent. But for sure there would have been some of that max floating into the corner for Jimmy. And he was, the ultimate short corner driver as well. Sema Dragon says, Viva Las Vegas. Yeah, right. There you go. Viva Las Vegas. It's going to be big weekend. As I say, I had a chat with Cameron a couple of days ago. Lots of talk about the ticket sales and the ticket prices and how difficult it is to get around and all the rubbish there that goes on. But as I said, really, this is only because we're in a little bit of a weird situation with Bernie's business model still being applied to Formula One, i.e. the Formula One industry takes all the money from any given Grand Prix apart from ticket sales. And on the other side of the coin, Liberty wanting to present Formula One as a sort of normal American big sports event, albeit around the world in all these exotic countries and cities. And the two don't actually meet, as Bernie realized long ago, which is why he always tried to stay away from street circuits as much as he could, and why he never even tried to change the formula of making money for Formula One that he created, which was all the money goes to us. If you want to stage a race, just do it for the honor. Don't even think about making money. Never going to happen. Unless the government's prepared to underwrite a loss of 20, 30 million a year, don't even think about being on our calendar. That was his approach, really. And I suppose Liberty kind of, softly tried to imply that these are normal events and there's a profit and loss at the end of the day. But that's not the case. And there'll be a lot of businesses that won't be doing business in Vegas because nobody can get to their shops or the restaurants. And there'll be a lot of money brought into Vegas as a city on the other side of the coin. And it's a question of how you balance it. You can do whatever you like with those numbers, I think. A bit like questions in a survey, isn't it? Do you want more overtaking in Formula One? Yeah. Would you want more overtaking in Formula One if it meant that all the cars looked the same and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from one from another? Oh, I don't know about that. No, we like the Ferrari to be different from the Mercedes. Ah, well, yeah. Anyway, Sarosh Soman. Kimi says he does right foot braking in road cars. Newell said in an interview that the main reason was that the brake pedals aren't spaced for left in braking road cars. Yeah, I think everybody... I only asked Terry that because I've never asked a rally driver that. I mean, all the Formula One drivers, I'm sure, brake with their right foot in an automatic road car. And obviously left foot brake in the race car. But I'm just interested if Terry Newell did that, because I imagine he's kind of ambidextrous with his braking foot, if you see what I mean, braking feet, being a rally driver. And but he said, right foot, yeah. I think Kimi probably would. I mean, I'd be interested if anybody ever practices left foot braking on the road. It's probably illegal these days, I don't know. But if you certainly when I was in Australia, not learning to drive, but in the early days of having my license and everything, there was no reason why you couldn't left foot brake if you wanted to in a 2-pedal car. And of course, it is still a very good thing. I'm going to try and do a piece with Cam Waters. I haven't yet spoken to him, but we've been talking on WhatsApp. Because I think I mentioned it, but have you seen that video he's got on Instagram of him doing the lap of Bathurst? I think he qualifies third or something like that in the Aussie V8 thing. And it's unbelievable because left foot braking, but it's the best footwell cam I've ever seen. It's perfectly positioned. You can really see the footwork. And as I've always thought, that is more dramatic than the steering, I think. It's just watching that footwork is just sensational. Anyway, he gets to the straight. Unbelievably, he's flat out on the throttle, obviously, and then because it's quite bumpy and it's quite a long straight, he then puts his left foot on top of his right foot on the throttle to keep the throttle absolutely flat. I don't know if this is a Rob Wilson thing or what. I'm absolutely dying to ask him what that was all about, but absolutely true. I'm just brilliant. I love it. Reminded me of that whole Jackie Stewart story of Longford's '66 Tasman race when he got cramp in his right foot because of some accident he'd had shortly before that, and an incident. I don't know if it was in a race car or not, but he couldn't really hold his right foot flat on the measured mile straight, the flying mile at Longford in the BRM. And he was doing the same thing. He had his left foot on the throttle. He didn't have it on top of the right foot. He actually put his left foot on the throttle and he's flat down the straight. Ajala Abdulaziz. Hello, Peter. Hello, mate. Nice to see you. I'm not sure that's come up, actually, that one. Sorry about that. I don't know why. Zijan Asfar. Peter, do you think Lewis could win another title with Ferrari? What do you think of Toto's recent remarks? Well, first of all, yes, of course, I do think he could win another title with Ferrari, but his biggest opponent is going to be Charles Leclerc. If the car's good enough to win a championship, then I would say there's much more likelihood that Charles will be the championship winner rather than Lewis, because I think he'll be as quick as Lewis, and I think he's got all the experience with the team, and he's that good and he's that hungry. I'm not saying Lewis isn't that good and that hungry in a new situation. I just think that if the car is that good, probably if the car's good enough to win a championship, that by definition means the car's going to win at least 50% of the races. And of those 50%, I think at least 60% will probably go to Charles of that 50%, if you see what I mean. Only because, he's just been there and knows the whole team, and he's that good anyway. It's not as if he's, not slow. I've always said Max, Lewis and Charles are the three best drivers in the world today, and they're very, very similar in the way they drive. What do I think of Toto's recent remarks? Not quite sure what that was. I've given up really reading all that stuff that comes out of that section of the motorsport community, and because I never really understand it. I think Cameron said he said something along the lines of Lewis dropped us in it or something and left at just the time when we weren't able to sign a top driver or something. I don't know. Didn't make much sense to me. Seems to me as if Lewis is giving them a lot of warning, isn't he? Anyway, like a whole year. What more do you want? What else did he say? I don't know what else he could have said, really. But all I would say is that Mercedes effectively said, we don't believe in Lewis being our future for much longer the day they signed George Russell. Because, as I've always said, if you've got Lewis Hamilton, you don't need George Russell in the other car. It'll just cramp his style. And if you've got George, you don't need Lewis, really. You've got Lewis and Valtteri Bottas, really good combination. As Red Bull are showing, continuing with Max and Sergio Perez, and to get the best from Max and the best from the team. And Valtteri would have been a very good teammate for Lewis all these years. And ever since Abu Dhabi 21. And I think that was the moment when Mercedes effectively said, we kind of lost a bit of confidence in Lewis, so we're going to get George in the car. And anyway, he'll probably take us into the future as well, as a double whammy. And that's kind of what's happened. So it's a shame, I think. I'm a great believer in... It was Peter Collins, I remember, my dear friend Peter Collins from years ago, when he was at... No, it was long before he went to Williams. I think it was when we were in Australia together. And he made the comment to me once. He said, it doesn't matter where your driver is finishing in the race, you are on the pit wall cheering him over the line. And I always thought, yeah, that's 100% right. And I think, if you've got Lewis Hamilton, you give him 100% and you have the teammate that he needs in the car to do the best job. And if he wants to keep Valtteri, you keep Valtteri. That's the one area where a driver should have impact. A driver as good as Lewis or Max or Charles should have that amount of clout, I think. I would give them that amount of clout as a team owner, if I was a team owner. And they didn't do that. And that was the moment it was all started to go wrong there, I think. And it's a disrespect apart from anything else. For me, you got Lewis Hamilton, you build the team around him, you do all you can to give him the best possible situation to win races and world championships. Brian Spur, hi from Durban, South Africa. Yeah, lovely place. Near the site of the South African Grand Prix when it was held at East London. So I've never went to that race on the Indian Ocean, but it was right on the Indian Ocean. A lot of offshore breezes affecting the crosswinds of the cars, but looked like a fabulous venue. Anyway, hi Brian. BNNT. Hi, Peter. What should we be looking out for in the remaining races as the teams prep for next year? Well, not much really, because next year is the last year of this existing formula that we've had since 2022, and there are no significant regulation changes to the cars for next year. So all that could be happening is that the teams that have got it wrong will be working sooner than others on trying to get the right solution for next year's car. I suppose the team that's going to be most interesting to watch is going to be Aston Martin, because they got rid of Dan Fallows already. That was predictable, and now Adrian's going to come in, and it's a bit late for him to do a completely new car, and I doubt they'll do that because they'll be focusing on 26 pretty quickly. But he'll be doing quite a lot of revamping of this car to make sure that they've got a car that can get them up near the McLarens. And I say that only because they got the same engine. That'll be Adrian's thing. Well, we got the same engine and package, so no reason why we should be blown away by McLaren. And he will be wanting to get them up there. And obviously, the more Adrian can do for the speed of the Aston Martin next year, the better for... there's more chance Lance Stroll's going to actually get it together, and then it's better for his relationship with the Stroll family anyway, which is always going to be a difficult one to manage, in my opinion. But if he can produce a pretty good improvement for next year, that's an important thing. So watching Aston and any stuff that might appear on the Aston won't be in the next 3 races, I doubt, but possibly Abu Dhabi test, something like that. The tyre test, there might be a little bit on the car. But for the others... I think most of them will be just glad to get the season over with and everyone going to bed and sleeping for 3 months. It won't be 3 months, will it? 3 weeks probably, because it's been such a long, hard year. And yeah, what will Ferrari? Let's think about it. Ferrari will be thinking, yeah, we definitely found a better sweet spot for the car, but we did have our difficult moments, and we now need to have a better average over the circuits with longer medium speed corners and that sort of track. They'll be looking to do that. Mercedes will be thinking, we got a great car, it's just not good all the time, or whatever they think. and just be trying to get the car to be, operating well everywhere, a bit like Ferrari. But they've got a lower baseline, though, from which they're operating, so it'll be more difficult for them. McLaren, they'll be thinking probably, we should have won that World Championship, Drivers' Championship I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's over, but if they don't win it, that's what they should be thinking, and they should be focusing more on management and cleaning up that side of the team, I think. I don't think it'd be difficult to imagine they're going to find a lot more pace in that car, stroke consistency in that car. And Red Bull will be looking to, it's a big, how they go in Qatar will be a really interesting point, I think, to see how they actually go alongside the McLaren, because it was wet in Brazil, so it's slightly difficult to compare. I think Vegas is a little bit of a one-off because it's long straights and DRS, and it's not a real racetrack. So in terms of how well they'll go at circuits like Bahrain or Silverstone, you need to have, Qatar will be a better pointer for where Red Bull are right now, and then we'll see what work they need to do over the winter for that. So a few interesting things. Raul, what's your thoughts on Bearman beating Hülkenberg in both times against him? Is Ollie that much better, or Nico just underperforming? I think Ollie is good. I really do think he's good, and I'm pleased to see it. He looks a lot better in Formula 1 than he's looked in Formula 2 this year, isn't it? It's a slightly bizarre thing. Although, having said that, if he hadn't stalled in his pit stop at Imola, and he'd won Imola as he should have, maybe he would have had a different F2 season, because then it all got on top of him. And I suppose Antonelli then being announced as the Mercedes Grand Prix driver would have psyched him out a bit as well, maybe. But he's a good guy. I like Ollie, and I think what do I think? I don't know. I think Nico's probably just can't believe that he's finally got a proper Grand Prix driver, the factory team, and it's a long-term contract, and he's going to make serious money, and he can be Nico Hülkenberg, basically living his own life for a change. And possibly that's taken him slightly out of focus at Haas. I don't know. Knowing Nico, it probably hasn't, because he's so competitive. But I don't know. Bearman's quick. There's no doubt about it. He's very quick and he's very good. But he is like Colapinto. He definitely drives to the back of the car as well. So, he definitely needs to focus more on getting the car in earlier. And that's where Antonelli had him this year in F2. And I hope he's realised that. He probably has, because I know the Ferrari Academy, Jock Clear and that lot are quite close to him, and they would have known that for sure. Back to Zishan Afsar. What do you make of Renault under Flav? Do you think they can get back to the pointy end of the grid? Yeah, I do. I think they'll do pretty well. Now they're getting the Mercedes deal. That's all confirmed. And Pierre Gasly's super quick. I would say he's at least as quick as Piastri. And he's good. He's very good. And I think Jack Doohan's good too. I just hope they're not putting Jack under too much pressure, because he's a back-end oversteery Liam Lawson type driver. You don't want that. Those drivers tend not to respond to pressure very well. So how Flav will handle that, and whether he's got some other driver already that he's going to shoehorn in if Jack doesn't get a podium within 4 races or whatever the benchmark he wants to give him. I'll be a bit nervous about how they're going to get the best from Jack, but I hope they stick with him and they're 100% behind him, because he is very good, Jack, and he's a great guy too. He's a good. Have you seen those shots again on Instagram? Have you seen him surfing and stuff? His balance and agility and athleticism, really good. No surprise, of course, his dad being Mick Doohan, but it's a good team, good drivers. They've got no excuse on the driver's side. Well, they haven't had for a while anyway. And now it's not so much Flav. I think Ollie Oakes will be pretty good on that too, in detail in terms of engineering and how to get the best from a car. And Ollie probably is pretty good with Jack as well. I think he's probably a Jack fan, so that's a good thing. And then Pierre's got good people around him, good management people around him. And those management people do more than the normal driver managers who just sit in the background doing nothing really. Letting the team run the driver. The Gasly management team does a very good job with engineering and with sort of looking at where the team's going and coming up with suggestions of how to improve the car as well. So I think they're going to go quite well, and I think a team like Visa Cash App might well get quite a lot of pressure from Alpine next year. They could be somewhere near McLaren. They might even be ahead of the factory team, factory Mercedes. Watch out. I'd say Pierre Gasly is definitely as quick as George Russell. I think he's that good. QSG drivers, Warren. Good afternoon. Let's go on another live stream called at the very beginning. Yes, guys, don't forget to like. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. Well, thank you very much for saying all that. I never normally say all that because I never remember to say it all. And I always think that, if you like this, subscribe. It's very sweet of you to say that. But it's a bit, over the top, isn't it? Jaeger 7. Morning, Peter. Morning to you. Do you think Max has any chance of winning the Vegas Grand Prix? Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a funny race. It's quite cold. It's held late at night, and it's long straights. It's not a difficult circuit. You got to say. I mean, if you're out there in qualifying, you got a good car, you're quick on the straight, new set of tires. If you're half reasonable, you should be pretty quick around Vegas. It's not that big a drama. Yes, there's some very fast corners and sweepers there, but they're not. If for drivers of the level that they're at in Formula One, the car does the job for you almost through there. So it's a question of how much downforce you run for your top speed advantage against what you need to get around those corners. And Max will do a really good job on that, and he'll be very good in race conditions. I'm still amazed at how he, not only in Brazil, how he managed not to hit anyone from where he was on the grid and how many passes he pulled off, but also other situations where he's been, he hasn't been at the front and he still managed to get through without being hit by anyone, which is very impressive, actually. And Vegas, I don't know, it'd be really interesting to see actually how Red Bull are compared with McLaren. My gut feeling is they'll be nearer to McLaren at Vegas than they will be at Qatar. But because there are more corners in Qatar, if you see what I mean. Ajala Abdulaziz. Peter, who do you think will be the number one driver for Ferrari in 2025? Well, I don't think Freddie won't be going down that path of who's the number one driver in the way that Dragoni went down that path with John Surtees and Lorenzo Bandini, famously in the 66 Monaco Grand Prix, obliging John Surtees, the number one, to run the V12, and Lorenzo Bandini had the lovely V8 car, which is much better suited for Monaco, which John wanted to drive. So I don't think we'll have any of those politics at Ferrari now with Freddie Vasseur there. And Lewis and he won't even be talking about, is Charles number one? Is he going to get bits? They'll be just having a laugh and knowing that the team will be really good, and they'll be doing the best job they can for both sides of the garage, and they'll keep the same mechanics on the same car throughout the year. None of this Mercedes stuff of switching them halfway through. And it'll be a good race team. They'll do a really good job. And I think Charles and Lewis will get on really well. Not that that's important, no issue if they don't speak to one another throughout the season, because that's kind of how teammates should be anyway. But I think there'll be a lot of mutual respect, let's put it that way, because Lewis is a refined guy and he's a good person. He's a good human being, and so is Charles. They both are, and they both got a lot of things about which they could speak to one another, if that makes sense. Legion B. Hi, Peter. Saw an interview recently where Coulthard stated that the driver, past or present, he would like to be stuck with in an elevator is Jim Clark, because he was known as a silent or even shy person, contrasting to Jackie Stewart. How much do you recognize that from your relationship with Jim? Yeah, I didn't have a relationship. I was just lucky to have 20 minutes with him at Sydney Airport in 1968. And to say the odd word to him when I was carrying his briefcase from the tarmac, across the tarmac from the aircraft to the terminal in 66 and 67. And I was just a school kid. All I can tell you is that he was incredibly polite and nice. And when he came back into the terminal in 68, when his plane didn't take off and had to come back for mechanical repairs, he saw me standing there and he said, you're still here, come and have a coffee, or come and have a drink, he said. And so what does that tell you? I can't imagine any of the Grand Prix drivers today doing that, in that situation, just seeing this 12-year-old kid standing there and inviting him to come and have a drink with him. And Jimmy had a very nice looking, attractive flight attendant on his arm at that point as well. So he obviously had a bit of time that he could have spent more profitably than with me. But nonetheless, and it was quite. And I asked him all about, Lotus 24s, Lotus 25s, why he had a dark blue peak on his helmet at the 64 Dutch Grand Prix, and what the Lotus IndyCar turbine was going to be like to drive, and what happened at Longford in the rain. I asked him all these questions, and he was perfect in answer. So, but he is very shy, and it wasn't so much shy as he was very polite and respectful and reserved. I think he could have a laugh with everybody, and so in that sense he wasn't a sort of shy, timid person that sat in the corner, but he was very humble. And there's that famous story of him being invited to start a race at Snetterton circa 66, and he wasn't actually racing that day, but he was going to start the race, drop the flag, and he did so. And a few of his friends said, "Oh, come on, now let's go have we're going to have lunch and we're going to have a drink," and they all headed off to the Duckham's Oil tent, which was the sort of biggest hospitality tent at the time with that sponsor, Duckham's Oil. And Jimmy refused to go because he hadn't been officially invited to the Duckham's tent. And it wasn't that he was annoyed that he hadn't been invited. He just didn't want to go and have to say to the attendant there, "Oh, sorry, I don't have a ticket, but I'm with my friends." And the guy might not, know what to do, and didn't want to put that person in that position. So he didn't go. In the end, of course, they spoke to the Duckham's people, who welcomed him with open arms, as you can imagine. But that was Jimmy's initial reaction. And that's, again, that's why I have so much respect for Jim Clark as a human being and as a person. And if you combine everything he did in the race car and with the race team and his loyalty to Lotus and Chapman, then for me, he was, like you, greatest of all time in terms of my field of perception. Yeah, and he was always incredibly. A couple of times I asked him for autographs at the track, and he was always very respectful for that as well. "Thank you very much," he would say. He would thank me for asking him for his autograph. Goravel. Good afternoon, Peter. My question is, do you think that Ferrari is the most improved team over the last 18 months? Most journalists really give Ferrari unfair treatment considering their development. It's a good question. I would say McLaren are the most improved team. And I suppose a lot of Italian journalists give Ferrari a hard time by saying, well, look what McLaren have done, where they were and where they are now. Ferrari should have done the same. But different engine, different this, different that. And I think they did a very, very good job over the winter of taking off some of the top speed from the car and giving themselves a nice big operating sweet spot in terms of tire management and balance of the car and grip level. And they did a really good job with that. They didn't do as good a job as McLaren have obviously done, but it wasn't far away, and they should be given a lot of credit for that. Mercedes, for example, haven't done as good a job as Ferrari, so a lot of credit. And I think I've a lot of respect too for Freddie Vasseur, and how he's not losing any sleep over not getting Adrian Newey. And I think that's a very powerful thing too. And it's a very powerful thing for the engineering team at Ferrari to be given that sort of vote of confidence by Fred now. And he's playing a reasonably active role in the engineering of the car as well, which I think is, that shows how good he is. He's a racer. He's a real racer, and real racers at that level should have a basic understanding of what makes a racing car work. You don't run teams like ART for that long without having a feel for how consistently to have a balance on a car and a grip level. And he's doing that. And he doesn't have he's not an engineer, but he's definitely got enough feel to be able to run the engineering department in a way that will be very profitable, I think, for Ferrari. And I think in a way it's probably a good thing Adrian's not going there, because it would have become a very Adrian-centric operation, do it this way or no way. And that's obviously what's going on at Aston Martin right now. So, yeah. Zishan Asawar again. Peter, thoughts on Damon Hill leaving Sky? Do you think it's hard to be a pundit these days and give your opinion without upsetting the drivers and teams? Well, I don't know the background to it. I don't watch Sky. I don't know anything about it. I don't live in England, and I never have the commentary on. So I don't know anything about that, other than that my conversation with Cameron suggests that this is all as a result of, I'm not saying this is what Cameron said is fact, but this is what he's heard, is that it's all a result of being critical of Max, or overcritical of Max, or whatever you want to say. And Sky getting paranoid about losing more viewers because of that, I suppose. I don't know, is it that? In which case it's very, very wrong, isn't it? Because if you employ a guy like Damon, what are you employing him to do other than to give his opinion as a former world champion? Why wouldn't you do that? Let him express his opinion. Otherwise, you just have a vanilla flavored, nothingness of drivel coming out saying platitudes about everything. If you want a bit of opinion, Damon Hill's going to give you an opinion, and don't get rid of him if he does express his opinions. And I think it also shows that there's a lot of, in my opinion, there's far too much weight paid to what they think are the viewers' reactions and what is good for the channel and what is good for the website or the YouTube channel, whatever it is. I'm not a great fan of hashtags. I'm not a great fan of trending. I like to just do my own thing, and I've always believed that is the way to go. And if Sky's Formula One was done on the basis of this is an important feature or driver or whatever engineer, we're going to do something about him for the sake of doing it because it's the correct thing to do, rather than will the fans want it, will they watch it, as being your guiding force, then it would be a much better thing. And always doing stuff down to the lowest common denominator, I think, is always a mistake. As myself, I'm going to talk about the way I've approached journalism over the last 50 years, and it was the same with writing. I'd always try to have my own opinion, and I wouldn't say. And the same with the YouTube channel. I don't say what I think people want to hear. I say what I think and what I enjoy about a race or watching a driver. And that's what ultimately is the essence, I think. And if Damon is saying what he thinks, give him respect for that. It's not difficult then to come up with another person who's going to maybe express the alternative opinion, to have a balance. But you don't get rid of a guy just because he's expressing an opinion that a lot of people don't agree with. That's my opinion. The jury are not out on tariffs. They will happen, as crazy as it sounds, says R. Oh, well, okay. Well, good luck with that then. Zishan Asfar, another question from you. Thoughts on Juan Pablo Montoya's Formula One career? Yeah, he very good Liam Lawson type style. I mean, obviously a step above Liam, but almost by the time he got into Formula One, really. But that sort of driver, very, very good. I just think it's a little bit like Fernando Alonso. I think he was his own worst enemy in terms of managing his career and saying the right thing at the right time and being in the right place at the right time and behaving the right way in the right time. And obviously there were issues when he left McLaren, and it was all to do with, had he been out, I think, riding a motocross bike or cycling or whatever it was when he hurt his arm, and I won't go into all that. But what I would say is that when he won the British Grand Prix for McLaren, I think the worst thing that he ever did was then to say, and the best thing was to beat Kimi Räikkönen today. And Kimi had been all over him all weekend. Kimi had a problem. And I think that was a mistake. And that probably got through to Ron as well. And again, he was just like Fernando. I think he was incapable of saying, Kimi's very, very good. He's better than me in a couple of areas. I'm better than him in a couple of areas. I need to improve in a couple of ways. I can still beat him over a season, but I've got to work hard at this. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me as a racing driver. And that's what Fernando should have said when he was alongside Lewis Hamilton at McLaren. But he didn't. And that's when it went downhill. Sebastian Vettel, same thing. He should have said that, alongside Daniel Ricciardo when he was beating him at Red Bull. And the same with Daniel with Max. But they don't. They get these egos and they just think, if somebody's beating me, it can't be my fault. It's got to be somebody else. And it's a shame. I just did that to try and get the exposure right again. It's weird, isn't it? I actually did buy another webcam the other day. Somebody said, get a different webcam. And I bought it and it was worse than this. So very good with Amazon. I love buying stuff from Amazon because if it doesn't work, in a day you get all your money back. It's amazing, that. Will I am. Hi, Peter. Will you be in Vegas this week? If so, will you host a meet and greet? Thanks. No, I won't be in Vegas. Sorry about that. got so many things on. We've got a golf tournament on here this weekend, and it's a Japanese finale to the World Rally Championship, and I can't imagine being in Vegas when that's on. I'm going to be on absolute tenterhooks there. And it's such a difficult situation for Hyundai and for Terry Newell particularly because, well, is it? That's a good question. Terry's got quite a sizable lead in the Drivers' Championship. His teammate Ott Tanak at Hyundai can still beat him. At the same time, Hyundai want both cars to go really well in order to beat Toyota in the Constructors' Championship. So what do you do? From Terry's point of view, actually the best thing that could happen is that Toyota are very quick and maybe finish first and second, and Terry's third and Tanak's fourth, or Tanak's third and he's fourth, because in which case he'll then win the Drivers' Championship. But that's not a great thing in terms of Hyundai beating Toyota. So Tanak is for sure going to go, all he can do is drive as hard as he can, and that will be good for Hyundai, assuming he doesn't make any mistakes. Whereas Terry has got to leave a bit of margin, you would imagine, because above all he's got to finish with no errors. But at the same time, he's got to be quick enough to keep Tanak under control. Good luck with that. It's all Cyril Abiteboul, who we know and love from the Lotus Formula One days, Renault days, and he's running that and running it really well actually. And he would be a good guy to run. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Liberty maybe buying MotoGP. I think Liberty should buy World Rally Championship. That's it. They would do a great job with it. It's a great sport, rallying. I love it, and he would be a good guy to head that up. Actually, very good. Anyway, I'm going to come back to questions, but I've got quite a lot of stuff I want to put in today. A little bit anyway. The first thing's not that good, but it's just interesting. It's a very short video that Red Bull put out of Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. This is stuff you didn't see on YouTube. Not that it's much different, but anyway, I thought it's very short. It's a sort of download a video thing of these two guys on a dirt oval with Shane Van Gisbergen, who's a former Aussie V8 driver, really quick, really good driver, and Connor Zilisch, who are the two regular NASCAR drivers. They drive these 500 horsepower V8 stock cars around this oval, and Red Bull put Liam and Yuki in these, and it's just quite interesting, I think, just to see them. And I think I'm not sure I can talk over this actually. Let me just do something here while I'm talking to you, because I think I can get my audio. What I didn't do was, I want to come back to me, but I want to, quite difficult to do this now without it moving. No, I can't do it. Actually, I'm not going to show, I'll show you just a little bit of this video. Now, you can't hear me talking. Sorry, I've messed that up. All right, forget about that one completely. That's nonsense. You don't really see very much anyway. You just see them on a bit of opposite lock. And Yuki is slightly quicker than Liam Lawson. I think that's the only thing that comes out of it. You think, wow, Liam Lawson, oversteer, oval, dirt. He's got to be quicker than Yuki Tsunoda. And Yuki's quicker, which actually is quite significant, I think. Yuki, to beat Liam Lawson in that situation, really good. So well done, Yuki Tsunoda. But I was very impressed with those two guys, Gisbergen and Zilisch. I hope they get a chance in Formula One cars. They look really professional, really good guys, know what they're talking about. That was one thing. Okay, next thing is, I've got a lot of mates in motor racing, as you probably know. And some young, some old, some my age. No, I'm old. But I love to keep in touch with them. And so periodically, I do give them a ring on WhatsApp or Zoom and have a bit of a chat. And I did that. I just had this feeling that I wanted to talk to Brian Redman, because I hadn't spoken to him for quite a while. And I still rate Brian as one of the greatest racing drivers in the history of the sport, let alone of his time. Absolutely superb in whatever he drove, whether it was Formula One, sports cars, Formula 5000, big E-type Jaguars, whatever, Formula 2, he was phenomenal. Very underrated. Never really given a proper factory Formula One opportunity over a full season. Otherwise, I think he would have won more than a few Grand Prix and probably a World Championship with the right team. And he's still a lovely guy, very happy, very, just enjoys life and lives in Florida. So I just thought it'd be nice to share with you how I caught up with him just a couple of days ago, and we didn't talk about very much really, but it was just to see how he was really. And so I'm going to do that, and I'll run that now, and then I'll come back. Okay, here we go. Brian Redman. I began by talking to him because I love Porsches. I must say Porsche sports cars. I'm 908s are my thing. So I began by asking him about his all-time favorite Porsche race car. If I said to you now, what is your favorite all-time Porsche racing car in terms of handling and grip and feel? Not necessarily power, but all the things that, you know, are really interesting. What would you say?
The 983.
Would you? Brilliant.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, knowing what we know now, the 983 would have been faster at Spa than the long-tail 908. That Sifford and I won in 69, and I set fastest lap. And about just over a year after that, I'm back at Spa for the final race of the 2-litre championship. I went 3 seconds faster in the 1.8-litre Chevron V16 Spider than I'd gone in the long-tail Porsche. So therefore, the 983 would have been much faster than the long-tail at Spa.
What was the 9082 Flounder like, though, in terms of handling? Why wouldn't you have chosen that as one of the great Porsches? Why was the 9083 a better handling car?
Because of the weight bias as much as anything. You know, they'd push the driver forward, then change the gearbox forward. And so the balance of the car was tremendous. It had, of course, it had pretty big tires as well. You know, it had big tires and it had no aerodynamic downforce, really, at all. But because of that weight bias, it was a superb handling car. You know.
Tell me, how are you, when you get behind the wheel now, how do you drive? Is it still the old Brian Redman?
Well, yes, but I don't enjoy racing much because if I try to race like I want to race, I'm going to crash. And so therefore, just driving around in the middle of a field in a race, it isn't any fun. About 2 months ago, I did a charitable fundraising event up at a private racetrack near Chicago called Autobahn, and I drove a brand new 911 Porsche, you know, and I don't know anything about these modern cars really at all. And so I rang an old Porsche racing friend of mine, and I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, when you get in it," he said, "there's a little knob on the dashboard, and you turn it, and it goes to a setting called Sport. And so just turn it to that." I said, "Well, what about gear changing?" He said, "Forget it, leave it." So, and it was unbelievable. I was driving, you know, pretty hard by the end of the day, and it just did everything. It changed gear up and down, you know, without doing anything. At the right time, the traction control was perfect. It was amazing.
When you say you were driving pretty hard, I've got fond memories of driving. I can't remember the name of the circuit we were at when you drove me in a 911 when I was in Florida about 10 years ago, probably. And I do recall you being absolutely full lock sideways in the middle of a third gear corner. You held it, you kept it all together, kept the foot in it as well, in true Bridges Formula 2 Lola Crystal Palace tradition. Lots of opposite.
Yes.
And you can still hold a slide then.
That was full opposite lock, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah.
You can still hold a slide then, Brian?
Yes, well, you know, I mean, most even cars, you know, by the time the tires became much wider, which was what, around 1967, 68, that area. I mean, in 66, when I was driving Charles Bridges' Lola T70 Mark II Can-Am car, the tires at that time were pretty narrow. You know, they were Dunlop, whatever they were, with a tread. And Charles called me one day and he said, "Can you get down to Oulton Port?" He said, "McLaren have lost all their cars. One's gone into the lake and 2 have blown up and they don't have any. It's a Firestone tire test." So off I hurtled to Oulton Park, and running on these new wide Firestone tyres, it was like 5 seconds a lap faster. So that's when it started, and that was 66. So by 68, 69, because the 9083, as mentioned, had very wide tyres, a lot of grip, but no aerodynamics. So what was just surprising to me, looking back a bit, is that Jim Hall showed with the Chaparrals how wings and downforce worked. And that was 66, 67, 68. And Porsche was still, in 1970, hell-bent on straight-line speed and no downforce.
Yeah, but even in those days, you could flatten the wings, so that wasn't even an issue anyway, even if they'd wanted to.
Well, yes, you could.
The straight line
The
speed.
Chaparral, you could. Yeah. But somehow the major manufacturers, European manufacturers, never latched onto it.
And nor did Colin Chapman. I mean, bear in mind the innovator, the great innovator. It wasn't until 68 that Chapman did anything to do with wings. And the Chaparral, as you say, had been around since what, 67, 66, back into 66. Incredible.
Yes. Incredible. Yes, it is.
What do you drive on the road now, Brian?
Well, first of all, I have no interest in driving a high-performance car on the road. And I never spend more than $25,000 on my road car.
Seems a lot.
And so I look for a car that's nice to drive and that meets the price point. And so my current car, I've had it for 3 years. It's a 2015 Cadillac ATS, which is a small four-door sedan, like a C-Class Mercedes. And I paid $16,000 for it 3 years ago. It was low mileage. It had 38,000 miles.
Good.
And it's now got 56,000 miles, and it's great, and it's still worth $11,000 or $12,000.
You sound like a Lancastrian second-hand car dealer.
I know, it's terrible.
So you're not into electric cars yet, then?
No, I think it's interesting, but I'd still, at this stage of everything, development and everything, still rather have a hybrid, with an engine and electric. Because going back a bit, when John Wyer was taking over the official running of the Porsche team in 1970, that was the test at the Ostrike ring, where they had John Wyer wasn't there, David York was there, Emano Pookie, Peter Davis, and John Horseman. And it was a full Porsche test. And so for Porsche, it was Kurt Ahrens was driving, and I was really representing John Wyer in Gulf. And I think the Porsche engineers knew what the problem was. It was aerodynamic. But they couldn't do anything because of PX insistence on not losing 1 kilometer speed down the Mulsanne Straight. Never mind that it was like 6 or 7 seconds faster, So that was a very interesting episode with Porsche.
A dangerous path in which they went, obviously, as we all know. As John Wolfe certainly found out.
I mean, the Lotus 70 Mark 3B was a much better car.
Yeah.
Much better, but it didn't have the engine. Back in 69, when the 917 came out, the Mark 3B Chevy 5-litre gave about 460 unreliable horsepower. And the 917, when it came out, of course, 4.5-litre, because it used the pistons, connecting rods, etc., from the 908, gave 570 horsepower, 100 horsepower high, out of the box, and then 620 when it went to 5-litre.
Wow. What a gorgeous sounding engine that would have been.
My first time at the Nürburgring was 1967 for Peter Sutcliffe with the GT40, and I never raced because on the Saturday morning the news came through my father had had a stroke on us, so I went back to England. But Peter said to me, Brian, I want you to remember 2 things. Now, I said, what, Peter? He said, the first is this is my car. I said, yes.
Mhm.
And he said, the second is, you've seen all these little bushes around the track? I said, yes. He said, just remember that underneath them is 100 feet of trunk. Because there were no curbs, and of course, even in a GT40, in that period before they leveled the track somewhat, we were off the ground 12 times a lap in a GT40.
And what happened in the Ferrari F2 car, Brian, on the South Circuit?
That was on the South Circuit, and so I don't remember any jumping or spots there on the South Circuit, but I don't remember much because I drove like a madman. I didn't have one thought in my head, you know. So.
But wasn't there some drama with the goggles and Mauro or something?
Yeah, I got to. Well, it started really on Saturday, the last qualifying session, when I came in like 10 minutes from the end. And Figueres said, Brian, why you stop? I said, well, I've gone as fast as I can. He said, Brian, go out and try harder. You're in 10th place. So I got out, I got 10th of a second quicker. I'd never been in 10th place. I was in 4th place. You know, so the race came and...
so he was just making that up. He was just making that up to try and make you go quicker.
Yeah.
They were the days.
So... in the race, I think X was leading, and maybe it was Irwin was second, or maybe Courage, and Ahrens was third, and I was fourth. We were all together in a bunch, and very early on, maybe the third or fourth lap, round the south curve, Ahrens put a wheel off in the dirt and showered me in stones. You know, one went through my goggle and hit me under the eye, and I thought, you know, to hit my eye, and I stopped. Slung my goggles off and drove back to the pits. Then Figueres, what's the matter? I said, it's okay, wear your spare goggle. I didn't have any. He said, take X. They were dark green and you couldn't see very well under the trees, okay in the sun. And as mentioned, I was gaining 2 seconds a lap on the leaders and set the fastest lap. And I was within half a second of finishing third. I think Derek was third and I was fourth, but I was on his tail and about to pass. But when I got back into the old sport hotel and sat on the bed with my head in my hands, I just go thinking about it all. And so when Figueres at dinner disappears, he comes back, he says, Brian, I speak with Singer Ferrari. You drive a Formula 2 and in September at Monza. Formula Uno. I said, no, thank you. He said, what do you mean, no, thank you? I said, if I drive for Ferrari, I'll be dead by the end of the year.
Well, so maybe you made the right decision, Brian, because here we are having this chat now, this lovely chat. Yeah, Brian Redman at his inimitable best. And it didn't do much good for Derek Bell or Jonathan Williams, actually, to accept that Ferrari drive. So Brian definitely knew what he was doing. And then, of course, had a big comeback by winning a race at Imola, big sports car race at Imola in the wet in Jackie Epstein's BRM, and beating Clay in a factory Ferrari, which then brought Ferrari back into the field for Brian. But what a guy. If you're wondering what that logo was on the top left of the screen, that was Targa 66, which is one of the clubs that Brian is involved with. It's basically track days, but just a brilliant thing. So if anybody's in the area, because he is a sensationally good driver. And for the eagle-eyed viewers amongst you, yes, that is me. That was me sitting in the GT40. That's actually Peter Sutcliffe's GT40. That's why I use that. And that's the guy that Brian was talking about when he had his first race at the ring. And I'm in that car because it was a Sydney Motor Show in 1966, and that car had just won the Rothmans 6-hour race at Surfers Paradise. And they sent it down to the motor show. And I was, in my school holidays, as I always did, I was working at the Australian Automobile Racing Club in Sydney. And Jeff Sykes, who was running it all, the general secretary, said, "Oh, Peter, they need someone to look after the car on the stand at the show for the next 4 days. Can you just make sure that nobody comes over the little fence we're going to put around it, and be in charge of the car and clean it and make sure you keep it clean?" Wow, what a thing! So that car arrived from Surfers, and it still smelt like a race car. You know, there's still smell of gearbox oil and brake fluid and everything there, and it was just amazing. And so here's another shot of me. There we go. That was really nice. And then just on that, this is a picture of because he used to be one of the sort of regulars at Warwick Farm when I was there, and other racetracks I went to as a kid. Unbelievable car control, really, really quick in every type of car he drove. And interestingly, I was thinking about that, and then because it was doing, but great to see. And I've just got here, for your pleasure, two of my favourite photographs of all time, actually, and they're both of Kevin Bartlett in the Mildren Alpha. Just trying to make sure there's not too many. I think you can see it there, right? Look at that. That's going through the S's at Warwick Farm. He's got his head out the window. Just a perfect drift in the Mildren Alpha GTA. And then, if that's not enough, look at this. This is the same race. That's a different corner. That's Ledger Corner. Doing exactly the same thing. And that's how he drove all the time. Just unbelievable four-wheel drifts everywhere. Kevin Bartlett, what a star. And he was quick in everything. As I say, every type of single-seater, he was amazingly good. So that was that. Speaking of coolest people that I know. Just amazingly good. And he used to just jump into Formula One cars on demand, really, as a sort of stand-in when the incumbent driver was injured or whatever. And he would just do brilliantly well straight away. And finished third. I think it was probably his first Grand Prix, Spanish Grand Prix, 68, in a Cooper BRM. And then had a front suspension, bottom wishbone break going through Les Combes at Spa on the old circuit. Massive shunt, which John Cooper accused him of causing until he saw a photograph taken by Peter Byrne, the Autosport photographer, very good photographer with whom I work quite a lot, which actually showed the wishbone snapping as he's going through the corner, which point, okay, sorry, Brian, yeah, lucky you're around. And he ended up by a park marshal's car. The car was just completely destroyed. Imagine how big a shunt that was. And the first guy to get to him was David Phipps, who was my mentor and who I knew extremely well. And he helped Brian, and yeah. And then he recovered from all that. He had some big shunts. I mean, he won that Targa in 70. Oh, by the way, the reason he calls it Targa 66 is because he won the Targa in 70 with Joe Siffert, Seppi Siffert, in the 9083. And then 71 had that massive shunt. The thing caught fire and exploded due to a puncture. And so 71 wasn't a great year. They didn't even know where he was, I think. I think Pedro eventually found him in which hospital he was in. But he recovered from all of that. Anyway, Targa 70 obviously means a lot to Brian, and the Targa Florio in general is an amazing race. We're 500 miles, 8,000 corners, and they won it. And they beat Nino Vaccarella in the local hero in the Ferrari. It was a massive win for Porsche and for Brian Redman and Joe Siffert. And so that's there. Targa means a lot to Brian. And 66 is because that was the race number he had when he drove the Jim Hall Chaparral entered Lola Formula 5000 that won 3 consecutive SCCA Formula 5000 championships in America. On 2 occasions beating Mario, and on the 3rd occasion beating Alonso. So 66, that was a Chaparral number anyway. So Targa 66, a very cool thing, isn't it? And so that's why Brian has that. And there. That's all I can say. It'd be good fun. Right, let's get back to some questions and hopefully some answers. Oh, I need to put up the thing again. 1 second. Let's have a look at this. Browser. Not showing at the moment. Typical. It's always the way with this browser thing, isn't it? Why is it such an issue? Anyway, I'm trying to get this one up. Oh, here we go. That one's showing. I'm sorry, I always have to go through this rigmarole, don't I? I'm trying to get... There it is. Hi, Peter. Thoughts on 2 Q1 flights, A and B, with 1 car from each team to have 10 cars on track, eliminate 3 slowest cars, then have Q2 with all remaining 14 cars and Q3 as is. Reduce congestion on track. Yeah. I don't know. They've played so much with qualifying and the systems of qualifying and the point scoring system and everything else and sprint racing. I just think let's not make any more changes. I know it sounds boring and I probably sound exhausted, but that's my feeling. I mean, what you say there is probably better, but yeah, congestion on track is not a good thing. I agree, but the answer is do the job, and as we saw in Brazil, it is a matter of seconds whether you get the car out at the front of the grid or not. McLaren did it when Q2 was restarted in Brazil, and they weren't at the front of the pit lane, but they still managed to have Lando and Piastri right out there, whereas Red Bull actually did a quicker turnaround but didn't get the cars out as efficiently, whatever it was. They didn't get them out, and therefore they were in the traffic. And I don't know what the answer to that is. Is it to change qualifying, or is it just to be more organised in terms of getting out of the pit lane? It's more organised getting out of the pit lane, probably just being prepared to sit there longer and making sure you're in the right place. They're very short, those qualifying sessions. And don't forget, a lot of what we saw, Lando in Baku, not getting out of Q1 was not because of traffic. It was because of McLaren badly organising Q1 and bringing both drivers in just towards the end of Q1 and then sending them out again to just do one quick lap on old tyres when there's a pretty good chance with 18 cars on the track that there was going to be a yellow or traffic. So it's a question of organising it well. I mean, Leclerc was also not clearly into Q2 at that moment, but he stayed out there and he just put a perfunctory lap in that made him about 10th quickest or 11th the quickest. It was enough to get through to Q2. That's all you need to do. Don't forget, all you need to do in Q1 is to get in top 15. It shouldn't be that difficult. And then, yeah, Q2 is a bit more defining, but then again, there are fewer cars on track. So I'm not sure they do need to change it, actually. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but in my opinion, I would say let's leave that one alone at the moment. Zenedine Zadine, Mansell was like Lewis, Senna was like Max. I need to get my head around that one. Yeah, I think Nigel was, yeah, I'm glad you compare it with Lewis. Yeah, probably was. Senna like Max? Yeah, stands comparison. What was Michael like? Michael was like Senna. Bring them all together. Full circle. Yeah, okay, good one, thank you. Divination? Peter, what do you make of Cameron's new podcast guest, Lower Lap Time? He's a driver coach who has made videos addressed to you about short corners and also disproving that Max is an early braker. Well, depends what you mean by early and late braking. I've always said that relating to the graphics that F1 put out, which is based on a marker point while the cars are still traveling in a straight line, and then measuring who brakes before or after that marker point and who brakes latest. I've always said that's very spurious when you're talking about comparing a driver who has an early turn-in with a driver who doesn't have an early turn-in. And therefore, you've got to look at a different point for Max. And I think relative to a Carlos Sainz or a Liam Lawson, for sure Max Verstappen is an early braker. Relative to what he's doing to his own rotation point based on his early turn-in, he brakes absolutely as late as he possibly can, obviously. So, just on the evidence of what you're giving me there, I don't know enough about lower lap time to be able to comment, but that's my point. There are two different measurements that you can make, and so I would always stand, if it's just an out-braking match into a first chicane off the line, Max would brake about as early as Lewis, but neither of them will brake as late as George Russell or possibly even Carlos Sainz. All things being equal. If you're talking about tyres not being up to temperature and managing a first corner turn in when the tyres are not really warm and the brakes aren't perfect, then a guy like Max or Lewis is always going to be better anyway. But in terms of sheer late braking, I would never include Max as a great late braker. He's a late braker within his own realm of how he drives. That's all that matters to Max Verstappen. And he doesn't do his passing by braking later. He does his passing going into the corner, and what he's doing is he's approaching a rotation point, as I said in Brazil. Completely different thing to passing somebody under brakes. K Bands. Hi Peter, how good would Carlos Sainz become if he has some sessions with Rob Wilson to shorten his corners? I think he would definitely find a tenth or two consistently. That's the point. And I think he would be more resilient to variables, crosswind, all the things that come into play, changing fuel load in the race, tyre management, all those things would improve, because it's not just a question of going into the corner a little bit earlier and less late. It's also a question of, in order to do that, you've got to be very, very supple with your inputs, and the inputs have to be at exactly the right rate, totally commensurate with the dynamic weights that are going on in the car anyway, and everything has to be in perfect harmony. That's how you maximize. Unless you do that, you cannot make the corner shorter. You'll just be slower. So it's all part of a bigger picture. And if you focus on all of those points, how can you not be a better driver? It defies logic that you wouldn't be better. I think a lot of people misunderstands probably for its short corners to mean taking a different line. It's not just about line, it's about what it takes with your inputs in order to create that line. That's the difference. And yeah, you can train all of those things. You can improve on all of those things, just as you can hit 1,000 bunker shots until it becomes completely natural. And that's what you need to do, in my opinion. And you'll never do that on a simulator, and you'll never do that studying data. Jay, hi Peter, do you think Lewis is struggling with the current cars as his late braking style isn't ideal for the heavier cars which generate downforce from the floor? I don't think Lewis is a late breaker. As I said, I think he's quite an early breaker relative to even to Sergio Perez, probably even to Valtteri Bottas, certainly to George Russell. But he, again, like Max, he's not braking to the same point as a Carlos Sainz. He's braking to a different point. So within what he does, he does brake late, but that's not the issue. The issue is the front end of the car being inconsistent and not having any feel for the perfect rotation point. And when he does have that rotation point, the back end then gets all loose and floppy or whatever it does and doesn't allow him to do the rotation that he wants. And then he gets frustrated and annoyed, and then he just focuses on trying to get the tyre management right. And to do that, he starts braking more in a straight line and driving like George. And, he's never done that much. And so he's never going to be quite as good as George in that. That's what's going on. But it's nothing to do with his late braking style. That's a misnomer, I'm afraid, Jay. But I hope, I've explained why it is, and you understand that. So me. Will Hamilton end up like Vettel with Ferrari? No, because Lewis is very self-critical, unlike Seb, who just had one way of driving and never changed. Lewis, as we can see in his Mercedes time now, has been driving very differently over the last couple of years. So he will always be looking. He'll be looking at how Charles drives. He'll be thinking about the car, what he can do with the car, what he can do differently from Charles, all the normal racing Lewis things that he does. So he will definitely not follow the Vettel pattern at all at Ferrari. He'll burn a unique path at Ferrari, I think. Paulo Resende, why is Bottas not considered for the Red Bull seat? Well, the same reason they're not considering putting Carlos Sainz in the car, because of the money that Sergio Perez brings, stroke matched with the reasonable quality of his performances. And it's difficult to beat that. As I've said for 18 months now, when people go on and on and on about, or have been going on about, Perez needs to be replaced, they need a faster driver, I always say, well, who is out there? First of all, who brings 40 million, who's as good as Sergio Perez? Lance Stroll, I wouldn't have said he's as good as Perez, but he could probably bring 40 mil, yeah, I agree. But who else? Nobody that I can think of. So maybe Gabriel Bortoleto, if he has all this money from Carlos Slim or Franco Colapinto, could maybe get a Red Bull drive. In that, they could potentially replace Perez, I guess. But there's no way they'd think of somebody like, if they're not thinking of somebody like Sainz, they're not going to think of Bottas because they don't bring any money with them. Matt Alford. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. I am. Thank you very much. Thank you for your usual excellent live streams. Peter, I keep remembering all those great drivers from the 80s and early 90s, remembering Alessandro Nannini. Yeah, I remember Alessandro, a very good guy, lovely guy, very funny guy. Of course, his sister was very cool as well. She was a big Italian rock star. And good mates with Riccardo Patrese. I remember playing golf with him in Mexico, I think. Riccardo, Nannini, Alessandro, me. I think that wasn't, I don't know who else was there. Can't remember now. Maybe Sheridan Thin was driving the buggy or something like that. And had a big laugh. Whenever I see a squirrel, I always think of Sandro Nannini, because I remember a squirrel ran across the fairway. And I know it wasn't what he actually said, but it sounded like he said, squirrelati, squirrelati. I thought, wow, what a great Italian word for a squirrel. But I'm sure it's not. But that's how my hearing at the time seemed to perceive it. And whenever I see a squirrel, I think, squirrelati, Sandro Nannini. Very sad end to his career, of course. But I'm glad he got that win in Japan. I can tell a story about that win in Japan, but I better not, because I think it's still under legal DNA jurisdiction to do with the front wings of those Benettons. But I won't go down that path now. So Sandro Nannini, yeah, great guy, lovely guy. Quick too, not slow at all. I'd say he was as good as Ricciardo. I'm going to annoy Eddie Cheever now and say I think he's quicker than Eddie Cheever. Ring Eddie, sorry mate. Raul, what was it like reporting GP2 in the early 2000s? It was, what was it like? Yeah, it was all right. I think it was quite easy to, well, it's relatively easy now. I think if you've got an F1 pass, you can always stroll into the F2 GP2 paddock. I had a lot of mates then. I was big mates with I forgot what the team was called now, the lovely Spanish guy, Alfonso, the king, the marquise, the princess, the prince. And he had that fat burner sponsorship, remember? He had some good drivers, good team. And I always used to hang out with him quite a lot. And then I was a big Lewis fan, obviously. So I was always slinking around ART, having a chat to all Hamilton. There you go. Jay, now Divination, lower lap time thinks Max is a pretty early breaker, but he thinks Lewis is a very late breaker. Well, I'm sorry. They're both relatively early breakers. Sorry. That's end of story. No more discussion. Cute. Hill Arimba. Hello, Peter. What are your predictions for this weekend's Las Vegas Grand Prix? What teams do you think will be competitive, and will Max clinch his 4th World Championship? That's a good question. I think, as I keep saying, I think Ferrari will be good this weekend. I can't see McLaren being slow, so they will be there. And I think Red Bull will be up there. I think they'll all be. I think it's a pretty, pretty straightforward circuit, providing you're not massively slow in a straight line, because that's what you got to do in order to make the car work around corners. Then I think it'll be very close, actually, between the 4 teams. And there might even be a sort of joker in there as well, a sort of Alpine or a, Yuki Tsunoda or whatever. Or a Williams or something. So I think it'll be close and scratchy. So the key element in the getting through to the grid, the front of the grid, and then the race will be staying out of trouble, really, because there'll be a lot of stuff going on probably, and predicting and just managing qualifying well, as we've been talking about in this live stream, definitely. And then in the race, staying out of trouble, and you'll do very well, assuming you're in the top 6 or 7. It's not a circuit, I think, where you've got to qualify on the front row in order to win. I don't think. I'm a bit ambivalent about the whole thing, so I can't even remember the circuit. All I know is there's a lot of fast corners, a lot of straight line stuff. So I think Ferrari will be good. I imagine Leclerc's going to be in good shape this weekend. Carlos too, probably. So yeah, if you're going to put money down, what the odds are, but somewhere like Carlos or Charles, if the odds are good, I would go for them. Will Max clinch? Well, that kind of depends on whether McLaren and Lando have a trouble-free weekend. There's no doubt they'll be quick, and no doubt they will be capable of winning the Grand Prix. The question is, will they manage the weekend well enough in order to do that? And that means getting him through qualifying in a way that they didn't in Baku, for example. And it means getting him through the race in the way they didn't in Brazil, for example. So, a lot of things could go wrong, but equally, on paper, Lando should go out there and get the pole and win the race. I think his car is good enough for that, notwithstanding everything I've just said about the Ferrari. But whether that happens, and then the next question will be the role played by Oscar, and whether he's quite capable of taking points from Lando this weekend. If they're in a group and there's too many cars around them to do any position swapping, Oscar could take points from Lando as well. So that's another thing. And will Perez go well in Vegas? There's a question for you. Nobody seems to care, do they? Probably. He'd probably go quite well. I'd say it's not that difficult there. He's quite good on fast corners, I think. Half reasonable. So, and he's good on traction stuff, isn't he? Out of slow corners, so he could be quite reasonable. So, right, I'm just freeing up the old chat. We seem to have got a lot of questions to go. Sujit says, I'm as much a fan of sports car racing as I am of Formula One. I wish there was more money in sports cars. I'm sure you tuned into Macau. GT3 race was so much fun with Fiocco and Masiello. Yeah, 2 good drivers, Fiocco and Masiello. As I say to Cameron, Masiello was really good in Formula 2. as another example of a guy that could easily have been very good in Formula One had he been given the right opportunity. And the same with Fuoco, I think, on debut in GT racing, very good. Lovely to see Macau. Sports car racing, you've got 8 manufacturers, I think, next year, or 26 or something. A lot. Almost too many, you could say. The problem with sports car racing, a problem with any form of motor racing outside Formula One, sadly, is that, and then again you've got to blame the Bernie model for this, business model, is that Formula One has sapped everything out of the rest of motorsport. And even to exist, the rest of motorsport needs amateur drivers to buy cars and enter cars, and then the pros and the semi-pros get an opportunity to race alongside them. And the grandstands, by and large, are empty. Obviously, with the exception of races like Le Mans and a few others. But overall, it's not a great spectator sport because, A, it doesn't get massive publicity. B, it's a long, drawn-out affair that can be boring on occasions. And so it's a difficult thing. But yeah, I agree with you. It's looking really tasty, WEC, in the years ahead, particularly with Hyundai coming in with the Genesis badge? I think it's called Genesis. And so, yeah, that'll be good. Dexter, stop it. He's scratching and pulling on the cord of the lighting system. So yeah, it should be good. I personally, as you know, I'm more into rallying than anything else. And when I watch Yuki and Liam in those stock cars, I think, wouldn't it be great to see Formula One drivers doing I know we have the sort of Race of Champions thing, which is also a very good thing, but I would love to see Grand Prix drivers doing the special super stage where they do them in the stadium, and there's a lot of auto test stuff and donuts and then going through narrow chicanes and quick corners and handbrake turns and stuff. I'd love to see Formula One drivers doing that and see who does the best job. That would be a really good thing. They should do that for every Grand Prix, I think. And also, I'm going to go to, just while I'm passing, I'm going to go to Monza the weekend of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Not out of protest at all, but because at Monza there's going to be Pirelli's last farewell to the World Rally Championship. It's going to be Hankook next year. And they've done them before, a Monza rally spectacular. And all the top rally teams are going to be at Monza, and I can't wait for that, to be there for that. And there's going to be a lot of that handbrake turn, donut stuff. Plus there'll be some quite good stages through the park there as well. So it'll be brilliant. Can't wait. Max Flashheart. There you go. I think this is all Blackadder, isn't it? There's a river called the River Blackadder, very near Jim Clark's house, Eddington, Mains. Flashheart. Besides Max, would other drivers impress you in the wet? The Lawson pass on Hamilton Alonso at Sao Paulo on a new track was my pass of the race. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Liam's good. Good car control. Very, very good. He's very good. Always said that. Ever since I saw him in a GP3, Formula 3 race in Hungary in the semi-wet one morning. I thought, wow, this guy's good. Yeah, he is good. And those conditions were good. He is back-endy at oversteery, but he's very, very good. But not as good as Yuki Tsunoda, as we just saw in all the... No, I'm only joking there, I'm sure. Liam did I'm sure there's a good reason why Liam... They were different cars for a start. So there you go. Who else was good in the wet? Well, George. I thought George was really good in the wet. Very good. He drove really well, George. I don't know. I feel as if I didn't give him enough credit. I don't know if everybody else did, but I thought he drove amazingly well. He is good, no doubt about it. I thought Oscar was a bit disappointing, and Lando was just spent too long trying to get past George. He should have, lap 3 it should have been boom. But I think that's because Lando, I think Lando would have seen that as, how do I outbrake this guy? He's a bit quicker than me on the straight, and yeah, my car's very good under braking, but he's braking unbelievably late. How do I do that? And of course, that was never a problem for Max because, as I said before, it wasn't a question of braking later than anyone he was passing. What it was just using the brakes less and getting into the corner at a higher speed and then just letting the car float, which he did beautifully well. There's another point about measuring this late braking. Of course, not all drivers brake at the same rate at the same point either. Sea Glazer. Both Alpine drivers were very good in the wet race, as seen in Brazil. Hamilton's very good. Norris is poor. Perez is also poor. Yeah, both Alpine drivers should give credit to those as well. Pierre from where he was, P11 or something. And Ocon, yeah, really good. Sorry, I forgot those. I should mention those. Esteban. Gerard Crabb. Las Vegas is losing money hosting Formula One for overseas TV timing and backdrop. Well, all Grand Prix lose money. I'm sorry. Welcome to the not talking to you now, Gerard. I'm talking to the Vegas people. Welcome to the club. You know, Formula One does not exist to make money for race promoters. That is the fact of life. And if any race promoter is on the calendar believing they can make money, then they've been misled. That isn't going to happen. There's lots of other stuff you can benefit, from which you can benefit. You know, the publicity, all the business that comes to the town, and the tourist budgets can all be mixed and matched under the table, whatever you want to do. But in terms of making money, as an American sports promoter is used to making money when he stages a baseball game or an NFL game, ain't going to happen. And of course, the timing is not great. Actually, they've done a very good job. I mean, the race is very early Sunday morning, isn't it? Which isn't a bad time for Europe to have it, and you probably get most of Asia with that. Not very good in America maybe, but yeah. But the whole point of Formula One is that it's a television sport, not a spectator sport. And that's the Bernie business model that Liberty bought and then adopted. And if you don't like it, fine, they can make changes. But at the moment they've decided to go with that, and the bottom line is it's a television sport. That's how they make the money. Television rights, not from attendance on the gate. Max Flashart. They stayed out, but Gasly made up so many places it was great. Yeah. They did stay out, and it was a good call by Ollie Oakes if he made that call, because they had nothing to lose. Slightly different from the Max call, as I say, because I think he'd done a much better job with these tyres and everything was going well. Okay. Seems to be a little chatting amongst yourselves. Max Flashart says, Charles will out-qualify Lewis. My feeling also. Ferrari 2000G. Hi, Peter. Who, in your opinion, is best placed to replace Stefano should he step down? There was a bit of talk about that on MotoGP taking his attention or whatever. Let me think about that one. Christian Horner, maybe? He'd do quite a good job. Cyril Abitbull, I think, would do a good job. Who else? About the only two I think of. I think Steve Nielsen would do quite a good job as well, actually. Probably not political enough to want to do that, but I think he knows enough about racing, and he's got enough racing blood in his veins to do a good job for them. Yeah. So there we go. I would say Christian Horner would be my number one comfort zone choice if Stefano was going to step to one side. Blues Almighty, don't these sessions feel like a campfire huddle where all the kids flock around the old warrior sharing his stories and wisdom, lighting up their eyes as they listen? I don't have a guitar. I'm not wearing a straw hat. We used to have lots of Barbies on the beach when I was a kid in Australia. I remember once a spider crawled up my leg, which was a bit worrying. But apart from that, we used to have a lot of Barbies there. It's amazing how cold sand gets at night, isn't it? It's one thing always used to be fire. We didn't have a lot of war stories, but we had a lot of sing-songs. And you know what we did? I was listening this morning to, everyone will be completely, I don't know what, throwing up probably when I say this. I was listening to Kenny Rogers this morning singing Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town. And I was singing that because I was trying to remind myself why that song meant so much to me when I was a kid in about 1968. And it's because I listened to the words carefully. Of course, it's because it's ostensibly a Vietnam veteran who's lost his legs in Vietnam, and he's saying to his girlfriend, "Don't leave me, don't go to town. Stay with me. I'm not going to be around very long anyway." And I remember then thinking, and then there's that end when it's don't something like please stick around, and it's just like a drum at the end, and it was incredibly emotional at the time. And it was emotional because I grew up at the time of the Vietnam War, and we were all very aware that there was a very good chance we were all going to be in Buktoir province within 6 months. And luckily, it ended just as I came through it. But my number was called up, my date was called up. And we used to have, going back to the campfires, we used to have volunteer to host American Marines on R&R, 2 weeks R&R from Vietnam, coming to Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, in our case Sydney, and they'd stay in our house and just live our life for 2 weeks, and they would be there around the bonfire with us. I remember, and I just remembered thinking, yeah, I remember that guy, that American soldier that was there that time. So yeah, very emotional times, actually, the 60s. So much going on. Vietnam, Apollo program, Gemini, Mercury, obviously, and then Formula One blossoming as well. How do we get onto all that? Henry Williams, do you think Lewis mentally checks out when the season is coming to close due to factors like World Drivers' Championship being over, or maybe this year when he's lost hope with the car? No, I think Lewis, I'm not talking to him at this specific moment, but I suspect his mindset is, I'm just going to enjoy these races. I'm a Formula One driver. I'm being paid ridiculous money. I love my life. I'm going to Las Vegas. I'm going to really enjoy it. I love America. I'm going to go to Qatar. It's going to be a cool circuit, even if I'm not that comfortable with the country. Abu Dhabi is always a lot of fun. There'll be lots of parties going on. It's my last 3 races with Merck. There's so many people here I love who've helped me win these championships. I'm going to really enjoy this time. And I'm just going to drive, and if the car's good, I know I'll be quick, and if the car's not good, I'll do my best. That's all he's thinking. Keep it simple. That's all he'll be thinking. And he'll probably go very well. As I say, it's not a circuit. When I say Vegas isn't a difficult circuit, what I mean is it's not a difficult circuit in that it'll really penalise a very bad car. I think you can get a reasonably good car to the front of the grid if you're very organised and you drive well. And then you can race well from there, obviously. So what I'm saying is it won't be very penalising for bad cars. So it should be quite a close race. And a guy like Lewis would have to go into Vegas thinking I've got half a chance of winning this race, wouldn't he? I can't imagine he's not. Adam Pearson, would you consider doing a live watch along for a future race where you stream while watching, show us your observations and answer super chats? Thank you very much for that question. I'm a bit nervous about that because I'm not 1,000% convinced that it's legal within the F1 rights framework. Oh, Dexter, sorry. Another reflex test from Dexter. He's telling me that Mum's just come home. Okay, good one. Thanks, Dex. And this sounds unbelievably arrogant, but if you are I think if you're a pretty small startup YouTube channel and you do that, I don't think there's any problem. But I think if you've got a bit of a profile, and maybe I have from my past or whatever, you're going to be on the spotlight in terms of, are there any rights infringements? That's why I'm always so careful about never using even screen grabs from the TV, let alone any footage. Never, ever do it. And I know a lot of other people, peers who've got YouTube channels to do with Formula One, do use quite a lot of stuff and get away with it. I don't even want to go near that. And I'm nervous that these things, to work, it's got to be pretty near real time. There's no point doing it an hour later or 2 hours later. So I'm just a bit nervous about it from a legal point of view. And I know it's like these things with Bernie. If you ask Bernie for something, he'll think, well, why is he asking me that? The answer's got to be no. Otherwise, I'm going to charge him a fortune. It's better not to ask, isn't it? But then if you don't ask, you don't do it anyway. So it's a bit of a difficult one. A lot of people have talked to me about it. And I love to do it. I'm just not convinced that it's... Henry Williams. What's all this? Okay, Henry Williams, I remember you asking him this question after his crash in qualifying of Brazil 2017, and he denied it. Okay, not sure what that was actually. Davey, Peter, are you glad that Max is getting love for his character and even his detractors can no longer deny his driving talent? Well, yeah, I think Max is a good guy, and if anybody's being negative about Max's character, then they need to look within, I would say. And equally, can his detractors no longer deny his driving talent? Well, I thought they did. I thought Lando said his win was nothing to do with talent. Isn't that what McLaren was saying after Brazil? So I wonder whether they've changed their tune at all. I wonder if Lando's looked at the race now and thought, Max actually did quite a good job at the weekend. So, as I said, to me, you can't really blame Lando for saying something that crass, because really the team should have been telling him what to say, or advising him what to say anyway. Addy Boy, it's weird how Toto Mercedes is looking at the drivers when they still can't get a grip on the car. Well, yeah, I mean, I actually don't know what he's been saying, but if they've been moaning about the drivers, and I agree with you 100%, because it's nothing to do with the drivers, of course not. It's all to do with the car. And had the car been a good car, Lewis could have won 2 more world championships with Valtteri Bottas alongside him, no problem, if the car had been good. But they're obviously not doing that, so why not? I've got a super chat here. Just answer that one. Good morning, Peter. The Las Vegas race isn't sold out and hotel bookings are down from last year. Why do you think the local draw is down? Well, because it's too expensive. It's unbelievably expensive. It's not actually expensive when you think of what you're watching, but it is expensive compared with other activities and sports in the United States. That's the problem. And it's that expensive because, as I've said several times on this stream, and as I've always said, the Bernie business model, which Liberty adopted, is that all the money from a Grand Prix goes to the Formula One industry. The TV rights, the title sponsorship of the race, the hospitality rights, the travel rights, all the circuit advertising, all goes to Formula One. The only money in the Bernie business model, which Liberty have adopted, that a promoter can make is the money on the gate, ticket sales, and, well, that's it, ticket sales. So all they can do is charge as much as they can possibly charge to try and mitigate the loss of putting on the race. And the Americans, that's why it's always been difficult putting on races in America. And at the moment we have these races because I believe Liberty are underwriting them because they want them. They want a Miami, they want a Vegas, they want an Austin. They're underwriting the races to make them happen because it's all going to be part of a bigger package of assets when they decide they want to sell Formula One. But they're not happening because those races are massively profitable, and they never will be profitable because they cost too much to put on and the promoter can never make a profit from it. So that's why they charge as much as they are, and that's always going to be the case so long as we have that business model. The only other business model that could work would be to give the promoters more money, and if that was to happen, then the teams would have to operate on much less money than they are. Forget 300 million, they'd have to operate on 100 million maximum. And all the other monies would have to stay the same, the income from TV rights and everything else, and that money would then have to go to the promoter to make this profitable for race promoters. But so long as Formula One can get away with it, and there are all these countries that are quite happy to underwrite the Grand Prix just to have the honor of it being in their country, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, whatever, then why would the teams do that? They want as much money as they can possibly have. Deathstruction says 2025 will be a dynamic year. New teams, new drivers, team mix-ups, and sort of leveling out the field. It could go many ways. Well, I think that applies to 2026 when we've got completely new cars and power units. 25, we've got some different driver lineups. I agree. I'm not sure that there are going to be massive changes in the order of merit in terms of the teams and the cars. Because it's the end of the formula and we've had these regulations now since 2022, the rich aren't necessarily going to get richer. They've got to a point where they can't really do much more, a bit like Red Bull, and I think McLaren will find themselves also hitting that brick wall now of what else can we do to the car, because they've basically got to the limit of what you can do within these regulations. Ferrari, Mercedes haven't found that point yet in terms of the sweet spot and over a full season, and the other teams behind them haven't got to that point at all. So you'll see more teams, I think, getting nearer to the brick wall of what can be achieved. Maybe, there'll be maybe Alpine will, for example. But for the real throwing the dice in the air and seeing where it lands, that's 2026. Hi, Peter. This is from Swizzy Hadebi. Thank you for the great show. All the drivers who had crashed at Interlagos are uncoincidentally long-cornered. Which long-cornered drivers have you spoken to about this, and what do they say? Oh, well, I haven't spoken to any of them about it. I've spoken to some of their engineers and their people, and they don't understand what I'm talking about, basically. So I don't spend a lot of time on it. I mean, think of this, if they did understand it, they wouldn't be doing it, or they'd be working to try and improve, but they don't. They're constantly told by their engineers and by their data that this is the way to drive, and they're braking a little bit later than the teammate there, and they got the power on a little bit sooner there and a little bit later here, and all they're doing is looking at data, comparing with teammates, and trying to be braking later, on the power sooner, and higher top speed than their teammate. That's all they want, and to me, it's all a waste of time. It's a waste of energy and a waste of time, and they should be looking at what Max is doing, rather than all the data within the team. But they don't, because they never think that way in Formula One. They never do. They never think outside their own little box. And it's worse now than ever, because there are so many little compartments within the team that this lot handles strategy, this lot handles tyre changing, this lot handles starts, this lot handles braking, this lot does rear suspension. There's so many things that you can never get an overall picture. That's what's completely wrong, in my opinion. You need a very, very broad brush approach. And I think the only guy that has that overall approach like that is Freddie Vasseur, I think. That's why I think he's doing a good job at Ferrari. I think he's very good at looking beyond all these bubbles, whereas all the British teams have tended to, and maybe Alpine are going to go that way too, but all the British teams have got this system now of all these committees and bubbles everywhere and silos, and it's impossible. The driver just looks at his data and says, oh, well, I'm braking later than my teammate, I must be quicker. It's all nonsense, of course. But well done for noticing that. You're absolutely right. All long corner drivers, because they're all catching rears on the white line, trying to brake late, or doing something, the car was always a bit unstable, trying to brake later than the next guy. Got to be braking later. It's rubbish. Look at what Max is doing. He's not passing people by braking later. End of story again. Sujith, I think Charles's racecraft is underrated. One of the few drivers Max enjoys going to wheel with, and they are mostly clean. Yeah, because he's a short corner driver like Max. Of course he loves racing with him. He understands what he's doing. They both can predict what the other's going to do. That's the beauty of racing closely. That's Jochen Rindt versus Jackie Stewart, Silverstone 69. Jackie knew exactly what Jochen was going to do next. Jochen knew exactly what Jackie was going to do next. And that's the pleasure of racing closely with another driver. And that's exactly what Max has with Charles. Not to that level, but in that realm. And I think Lewis will be the same. If you take away all the sort of acidic emotion that obviously still exists between Lewis and Max, and you just take them as three clean drivers and put Charles in there, all three of them would be very capable of having incredibly close races. And don't forget how good that lap was between Max and Lewis before they had the shunt at Copse Corner on the opening lap at 21 Silverstone. Before they got to that corner, have you re-watched how closely they raced? Unbelievably good up to that point. Yeah, and then Lewis went down the inside, Max, But that was a real example of how two true professionals can race one another prior to the shunt. C. Glazer, Addy Boyham will not be in Merc 25. Why Wolf shouldn't look for a driver? What's all that? I don't understand that. He's looking for a driver because Lewis won't be there. So, and he's taking a very talented new young driver to put alongside George Russell. Nothing wrong with that. I don't know why he wasted all that time with Lewis, though. If he wanted to go George with the young driver, why did he keep Lewis? Lewis isn't a young driver. So, it'll be a good team. I think Russell Antonelli is a very strong team. I think Gasly and Doohan is a strong team. They're all strong. I mean, Haas have got a great team, haven't they? Very good. Yathin Manjar at Peter Williams from South Africa. Thank you. Peter, do you think Lance Stroll will still be in the Aston in 26? Surely FD is being wasted as the reserve and much more capable. Well, yeah, of course he'll be there because it's his dad's team, and his dad's only doing that team in order for Lance to win a Grand Prix or several Grand Prix. That's the only reason Lawrence Stroll is doing that team. So, and there is absolutely no reason why Felipe Drugovich should have signed as a test driver for that team. It was the biggest waste of money in the history of wastages of money. As I said at the time, 600,000 I heard. So why would he do that? He's got no chance of racing there. They're never going to put a young guy in even as number one because he might blow away the Lance Stroll. And he's never going to replace Lance Stroll. So how does that help him? It's just, got to be there testing. Got to be doing FP1 in Brazil. We didn't even do FP1 in Brazil, did he? I don't think he did. And so He did it in Mexico, didn't he? What good's that? If he hadn't done that Aston deal, I think he might have got some offers and some drives. But I really rate Felipe Drugovich. It winds me up when I think of the wastage there. Yathin Majanu. What do you think of the bias that Max has claimed from the British media? A bias against him, I think you mean. Yeah, that's probably true. As I said, Nigel Mansell used to get a massive amount of anti-British press as well. So, sorry, the British press used to give Mansell a lot of negative coverage before he became famous. And so they're always been like that. More cliquey, I think, than the French or the Italians or the Germans. I always got on very well with all the French journalists, all the Italians, all the Germans. And I'm very pleased to see Jochen von Osterroth, one of my dear friends from that period when everybody used to write and read, magazines were read. Jochen von Osterroth, a very good journalist, is still doing a site. I think it's called Fast Curb or something like that. It's all German, obviously. But I remember Jochen was the first guy that took me for a run in a Golf GTI in the German Grand Prix. I was staying in Heidelberg and we went to a IRPA dinner, International Racing Press Association, and then afterwards he said, "Oh, you got to come out and try this new Golf GTI." We went up this hill. I couldn't believe it. Jochen von Osterroth. Yeah, anyway, getting back to the point, I always got on really well with all the European journalists and the Americans. I never really got on with the British press. I've got some dear friends there still, one or two, but in general, I always stayed away from the British press because they were so, I don't know, what's the word? They were driven by all that Fleet Street rubbish. I can't believe people still read newspapers, to be honest, but all that Fleet Street thing, whether they have any influence whatsoever, but apparently they do. I don't know how. And they used to be sort of bedrock of then there was the specialist press, and everybody sort of mixed and matched, and they got all these things. And Nigel was a guy they all decided they needed to hate and not help very early on. And I'm sure Max is just feeling that now. Quite why they've done it against Max. I think that all started with the Damon against Michael thing, and therefore, Max is a sort of new Michael in their minds. I suppose that's what that was about. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, enough said. Actually, one of the funniest things, the cleverest things, there was a guy called Ian Breach that used to write a column, I think, in Car Magazine, British journalist. And he basically did what I did and sort of slagged off the British press. And the next month, there was a headline in one of the other magazines, and it said, "Once more into your friends, dear Breach." Those who know Henry V will see the wit in that one. Gerard Crabb. If Andretti can't get in, maybe General Motors will come in as a technology partner with another team like GR Toyota with Haas, Ford and Red Bull. Yeah, but that'd be boring, wouldn't it? We want them coming in with Andretti. We don't want all these technology partners. What's that all about? Yeah, I'm sorry. I just think it's an absolute scandal that he doesn't have that entry and we're not celebrating Andretti's arrival on the grid in Formula One. And the FIA they were the ones that issued the statement that they were not going to be allowed because they didn't fulfill certain criteria and that Andretti needed Formula One more than Formula One needed Andretti, and that's completely wrong in my view. And it's a great shame. But yeah, I mean, we talked earlier in the live stream about the future of a team like Haas being able to use so many outside suppliers in order to design and build its own car, quote unquote, as per the regulations. We're talking Ferrari, Dallara, and now Toyota for a team that's supposed to be building everything in-house. I'm paraphrasing a little bit when I say in-house, but you know where I'm coming from. It's supposed to be a mini NASA. Every race team is supposed to be a mini NASA. That is what the DNA of Formula One is all about, what we're told it's all about. And yet they've got all these outside suppliers. And yeah, it's a shame. I would hate to see, I'd hate to see GM coming in just as a technology partner. They should be in with Cadillac and Andretti. But don't forget Brian Redman beat Mario 3 times in a row in Formula 5000. Got to say that. Max Flashart. Adrian should design a WEC car for Lance. Yeah, but Lance won't want to do WEC, will he? It's too long. The races are too long, too boring. Nobody's there. He won't want to do that. Lance would probably go. He'd rather go skiing or rallying, I would imagine, than WEC. I would imagine. I may be wrong, but I'm sure Adrian could design a major WEC car. Although they're all a bit templating, they all look the same, don't they? Probably going to get criticised for saying that, but I think they are. Suje says, AMR is debuting the Aston Martin Valkyrie in WEC next season. Already an Adrian Newey design. Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, good. Shows how much I know. Adiboy, no, I mean like the comments Peter is talking about. Yeah, Merck has to go for Ant now, but it's like how Ferrari ousted Schumacher. He was supposed to stay within the team in probably a managerial role. Really? I don't think so. I think he had the option to do that because Ross wasn't going to stay around forever. Jean Todt neither. So I think Michael, if he'd wanted to take over the running of Ferrari, could have done that. But he just wanted to go and enjoy life a bit, didn't he? Be with the family and go to America, ride horses, ski, whatever. Do his not hang. What do you call it? Not hang gliding. The other thing where you just jump out. And he loved all that. Bikes. And then he came back for Merck anyway. So it wasn't all done anyway in terms of what he wanted to do. So yeah. So Jared Crabb, Aston due for a new driver lineup, 26 car being competitive. Well, as I said before, if you're Fernando, you're going to want to be in that Adrian Newey car in 26. So Fernando's going to be doing all he can to shrug off the number of races he's already done. Is it 400 now? If it's 400, this is his 400th because there were two. When he celebrated 400, there were two he didn't actually start. So I'm going to celebrate his 400th in Vegas just to be different. And anyway, assuming it's 400, I don't know if it's 400 or 200. It means nothing to me because there's so many races in 1 year. I still think in terms of Luigi Fagioli and Juan Manuel Fangio, as you know. But if Fernando isn't delivering stroke, they don't want him because he's too old, which is unlikely. I think they might want to continue with him, and I think he'll be doing all he can to make sure that he can deliver. But obviously that would be a prime seat, that Adrian Newey car. Anyone good would be interested in that car, I would have thought, including Max. Jay Tucker says, out of all the new Formula One drivers, which one of them has the best adaptability from car to car, say from F1 car to GT3 car or a hypercar? Well, Yuki Tsunoda did quite well in that NASCAR thing, didn't he? 5-litre V8, did all right. Little Yuki. I don't know. We haven't seen them really because they're not allowed to do any of that cross-referencing. They're not allowed to drive anything. I'm surprised Red Bull even allowed. Well, it just shows Red Bull are quite cool, isn't it? They did allow the drivers to do that. I do know of a couple of drivers that have driven rally cars relatively recently, but that's all very secret and nobody's supposed to know. So that doesn't achieve much, and we don't know how they went. So I don't know. I mean, if you wanted me to guess, I would say, I don't know, the obvious. Colapinto and Antonelli, probably. But that's probably doing a disservice to Bearman and maybe Lawson, if you want to include Lawson as a new driver. I don't know. It's interesting that when most of the quick drivers have had the odd opportunity to do Porsche Carrera Cup, they don't immediately get the pole and win the race, do they? I saw that. I mean, that didn't happen with Felix Rosenqvist, and it didn't happen recently with Kalle Rovanperä. He went quite well. He started midfield and finished fourth or something, but it wasn't like disappear. It just shows how motor racing is today. The people that do it regularly just do it so well that it's impossible, really, even for a Max just to jump in a car and blow everybody away. What's he going to do differently than the guys who are winning at that time in cars that are glued to the road, incredible grip, incredible balance? MSC Giles says Red Bull is usually too hard on its tyres this year. Maybe that means those heat up quicker than for McLaren and Ferrari. Might be why Red Bull could be relatively good this weekend. Yeah, as I say, it's not a particularly demanding circuit on cars, Vegas. And anyway, it's going to be quite cold. So let's just have a look, before we're doing that, let's just have a look at the tyres that will be running this weekend. We can see there Vegas at the bottom there. Yeah, the softest in the range, as they would be for the, for this cold night start. And that might be to Red Bull's advantage. Yeah, Might not be to their advantage for qualifying though. Might be difficult. Tire temperatures might be very difficult to get. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, in general, with Red Bull being hard on tires, what does that mean? That means basically that they don't have the same downforce for the wing level they need to run in order to be competitive on the straight as McLaren. And because they don't have the same downforce, the car's moving around more and there's more dynamic weights going in different directions, and they're having to put more energy, and more energy is going through the tires, and therefore the drivers are finding it difficult to be quick without overheating the tires. It's not a tire problem as such. It's what it is basically not as much downforce as a McLaren on any given corner. That's what's going on. So in order to have a bigger managerial sweet spot of the tires, they've got to have more overall grip and balance for the same top speed. Sujith talking to Jay Taka, but I'm putting this up, because I don't know much about WEC. He's saying hypercar, F1 to hypercar is a bit easier. The hybrid systems are similar. The brakes seem very similar with the harvesting, but yeah, now WEC has banned tire warmers. That would be difficult. Okay. Yeah, well, we have tire warmers in Formula One, but they're not as hot as they used to be, and tires are still lukewarm and often quite cold at restarts. So the gap isn't as big as it could be. Peter, what can the FIA do to improve the Monaco circuit? Formula One racing is impossible there. Really? Oh, I don't think anybody ever thought that you could race at Monaco. You just go to Monaco and parade around and do qualifying laps if you can. What can they do to improve Monaco? Well, get rid of all the money and the nightclubs and all the bling, and then it'd be a much better place, I think. That's simple. That's what I would do. Move on. Peter, that's a weird take. This is from MSC Bajaz. When Lewis has in-team competition, he gets serious, as most drivers do. Oh, okay. So the reason Max Verstappen's so quick is because he has massive in-team competition, is it? The reason Jackie Stewart was so good is because Johnny Servo's Gavin gave him so much trouble. And John Miles pushed Jochen Rindt to the absolute limit. And Rubens Barrichello and Felipe Massa were all over Michael. No, I'm sorry. A great driver like Lewis does not need somebody either side of him distracting him. He just needs to focus on what he needs to do, and then he will deliver. End of story. You don't need to put a George Russell alongside Lewis. In fact, it'll have the opposite effect, as indeed Oscar Piastri has on Lando Norris's World Championship. And if Lando had Daniel Ricciardo alongside him at McLaren, I think he'd have more points now, definitely. And and not only the points that Oscar's taken, I think he would have done a better job in a couple of areas. It's very distracting. It's just something in your peripheral vision all the time, having to worry about the other side of the garage. This guy's 0.3 quicker. Why? And that's, you're spending time on things you shouldn't be worrying about. You should be worrying about your own situation. And then it builds up a split down the middle, and it's not good. That's why Red Bull don't do that. That's why Max doesn't want that. That's why Lewis doesn't want that. That's why Charles doesn't want that, because they know they can do the job. They're that confident. Same with Nigel. Nigel's big thing when he went back to Williams finally was say to Frank, okay, but I don't want a Nelson Piquet or a Keke Rosberg or an Alan Prost in the other car. I want a guy that I like, who I know I can trust, who isn't as quick as me, but he's going to do the job if I have a problem with my car. Okay, Nigel, who would that be? Riccardo Patrese. Oh, okay. And what happened? Okay, a lot of it had to do with the car, but Nigel was completely calm and happy and never drove better than when he had Patrese in the other car. He didn't need, it's just a juvenile, childish thing to think that in order to get the best from one driver, you've got to put a really quick driver in the other car to prod him on. If drivers respond to that, they're not very good, in my opinion. Hell is Nomad. How many more championships will Max Verstappen win? Well, it depends, obviously, on a million things, like power units from 26 onwards and cars and chassis from 26 onwards. We don't even know the complete regulations yet, so it's very difficult. But on the assumption that Ford and Red Bull powertrains will do a good job with that engine, I think, and he stays at Red Bull, and they're still a good team, even if Christian Horner goes to Liberty, which was, might happen, I think he could still win another couple there. If he goes to Aston Martin Adrian Newey in 27, having seen that the 26 Red Bull's not as good as he wants it to be. I think he can win a couple of championships there. So we're talking 5 probably in total. And more, 2, yeah, I would say. Peter D. Windsor. Oh, just at Peter Windsor. With no D in there, actually. No D at all. Windsor without a D. Should they use AI to determine the penalties during racing without stewards and its inconsistent judging? AI now can replace lawyers almost. I enjoy your talks always. Thank you very much. I don't know enough about AI to answer that. I'm going to be talking to Peter Wright fairly soon, who's just written his own autobiography, and it's on the post, in the post now, wending its way to Spain. And I'm going to have Peter online, and I'm going to talk to him. He'd be a very good person to ask about that, I think. Peter Wright, of course, was the aerodynamicist who gave us ground effect with Colin Chapman, and then spent many years working with the FIA on aerodynamics and where we were going with aerodynamics, and played a major role in the improvement of safety in Formula One post Senna's accident. It's a great guy. Looking forward to that chat. But he would have a better feel, I think, for the reliability of AI and the data you can put into AI in order for it to come up with the right decisions. Chabour, we're talking about Leclerc versus Hamilton here. Charles is going to demonstrate his superior skills at Ferrari. Lewis is making a mistake, not bowing out on top, going down the same path as Michael did when he came back, unfortunately. No, I disagree with that. I think he'll still drive. I think Lewis is still extremely quick, and I think he'll love Ferrari, and it'll bring out the best in him in terms of being relaxed, enjoying the team and the people and the cars. And anyway, he's entitled to have a couple of years in a nice Ferrari team, isn't he? What could be better for a guy like that? Enjoy it. And we as fans will love it too, I think. Well, I'll enjoy watching Lewis in red overalls and driving the Ferrari and being there and learning Italian or whatever he's going to do. I love it. I think it's a great thing. Why does it... I don't see anything negative about it, apart from the fact that Paul Carlos Sainz has lost his drive, and that's a completely different subject. It's nothing to do with Lewis going there. It's to do with Ferrari didn't need to replace Carlos Sainz in the first place. And I still feel strongly about that. I feel terrible for Carlos Sainz that he's racing for Williams next year. Gary Kennedy. Check out the amazing Jet Lawrence. He's one of those special generational kids who's changing the way you ride motocross. Okay, similarities with Max. Yeah, well, I love motocross, so thank you very much for the Gary. Jet Lawrence. Mega. Good. 321 Gone says, Lawrence and Lance Stroll have done it their way for this long. What are the odds they'll listen to us? Well, none at all, I'm afraid. They don't even know we exist. I think I've done this one, but I'll do it again. Aaron Quillas is a super chat. Good morning, Peter. Vegas race isn't sold out. Hotel bookings are down. What do you think the local draw is down? Why do you think? I've explained that it's due to the fact that the races are not, the business world of Formula One is not structured in order to make it profitable for sports promoters. And all they have left to sell is the tickets on the gate. Whereas normally in NFL or wherever, World Series, they'd be used to getting money from the TV rights or from the title rights of the event or signage, whatever. They don't have any of that access to that money, and the only money they can make is from the gate, and therefore they have to charge as much as they can possibly charge, and therefore the Americans are very used to not paying that, are not going to continue to do it. Hi Peter, out of track, who was the rudest driver you've seen? Probably Eddie Irvine, I would think. I think so. Yeah, probably. But, you know, there are a few others as well, let me think. Stefano Modena wasn't exactly pleasant. No, I shouldn't be going down that path, really. If you haven't got something good to say, don't say it. Okay, I take it all back, Eddie and Stefano. Good guys. Max Flashart, broaden the performance curve. See, Attaboy. I think he's kind of agreeing with me what I'm saying about Freddie Vasseur and the job he's doing at Ferrari. He says, I mean, a good commendation of Fred Vasseur is just him leaving Sauber and they immediately fell off the cliff. Well, there you go. Yep, true. Yeah, predictions of Vegas. Yeah, we've done that one. Max Fasher, F1 Live TV is delayed now and posted to YouTube and Formula One TV. Once legal, check it. Okay. All right. M. Edmonds, are you saying that Colapinto would be a terrible partner for Max, as his driving style is totally wrong for the Red Bull setup? No, not at all. I don't think it's a bad thing for a team to have two contrasting styles. And I think that's why it's a shame Sainz is leaving Ferrari, because there you have two contrasting styles. You have Sainz and you have Leclerc. And in one race, Mexico perfectly suits Sainz, and in the next race, Brazil perfectly suits Leclerc. That's perfect use of your two drivers. And the problem is the teams don't know enough about the style of the drivers and don't believe what I've just said. They would say, oh no, the difference isn't the way they go into corners. The difference is that Charles is able to drive the car with this or that, and Carlos likes this or that. And they would go down to some complicated pigeonhole that means nothing. The reality is those two guys are at the opposite ends of the spectrum of how you drive, and Ferrari therefore are a very good team because they got a car that is kind of approaching the ends of those spectrums. And if they have Lewis, you could argue he's pretty like Charles Leclerc, and therefore they're not going to be going into territories that maybe Carlos Sainz would have taken them into, which would be useful in certain situations. So I think Colapinto probably would be a very good partner to Max Verstappen because he is a bit later on turning. He's a pretty late breaker, feels the car at the rear, good car control, seems a nice guy. Yeah, he's the opposite end, so he could do quite a good job, yeah. Gerard Crabb, Murray Walker was vocal in Hill Schumacher days. Maybe they were going to rest him and Hill decided to leave. Yeah, well, Murray was very much into Damon, wasn't he? Destruction says, I never found Damon Hill insufferable. Everyone can have their opinions, and he has praised Max plenty as well. Oh, well. Rosa Cabero, I didn't expect Peter to be this amusing. From what I heard, I thought he would be intimidating and stoic. Really? I don't even know what stoic means. I think I do. No, hopefully I'm not. As my mum said, don't lose your sense of humour. And try not to, really. And occasionally I get a bit emotional about things. It's only because I'm passionate about it. And I cry quite easily, funnily enough. Not a good thing. But I remember at school, I always used to cry quite a lot. I think I was, today's parlance, I was probably bullied a bit. But at the same time, I was always really pleased because for some reason my face, you couldn't really tell if I'd been crying. I used to think that was pretty cool that I could do that. Anyway, I hope these live streams, my videos, are more about having a laugh than anything else. If they're not, then Flaxshot says you can't hear the video. That can't be right, surely. It's working here, surely. Oh no, you couldn't hear the video when I did that Red Bull thing, I know. So, Peter, what's your thoughts on Nicholas Gronholm? I remember watching Marcus in the Peugeot 206, one of my favourite rally cars of all time. Yeah, I love the 206. I love Marcus as well. One of those classic, one-liners he used to come up with. Nicholas, don't know much about him. I know a lot about Oliver Solberg, chatting to him recently, but not Nicholas Gronholm. Is he WRCR2? WRC2? I need to look. Yuki's lighter, that's what they're saying, that's why he won it. Connor Zilch would do very well in Formula 1. Well, there you go. I mean, just looking at him in that video, I thought, wow, this guy's cool. Jared Crabb, Yuki's beaten a few teammates. Now pity Honda not supplying second team. Yeah, I know. What's he going to do? Hopefully he'll get a drive somewhere. And he's actually Yuki's beaten people that matter. Wollongabba, looks like an Australian there. You are so right on drivers' egos. I find Charles an anomaly. He's always talking about learning. He said, I work on things that my teammates are better at and I improve quickly. Funny how it works. Well, absolutely. Charles is self-critical. So is Lewis still, and so is Max in his own way. Doesn't talk about it very much, but he is for sure. And not many others are. I think Oscar tries hard, but I think he's getting McLaren are getting that under control now, making sure he doesn't become too self-critical and he just plateaus out into being what he is. That appears what's going on in the last couple of races anyway. But if you leave Oscar on his own, I think he is self-critical and he will improve a lot still from where he is. But I'm not sure McLaren will let that happen. Not because they want to help or favour Lando, but because it's their way of operating. No, this is the way it is. Brake later, turn in sooner, whatever. Paul Gilbert, I can see a long career for Max in endurance racing after he retires from Formula One. I think you'd get very bored with that, won't he? Going round and round and round, especially if he's got to have an amateur with him or something. No, he won't in the category in which he's in, but I think he'll do something a bit like more. He'll do rallying, won't he? I hope he does. Either do rallying or outlaw sprints in America. Dirt, quarter-mile ovals, mega. 800 horsepower, Tony Stewart spec. Benny's News Showdown. Love these interviews. Thank you very much. Blues Almighty. How cool. I drove an ATS back in the days. Great car. Really? When you say an ATS, of course, that can mean two things. It could mean the Gunter Schmidt ATS, the yellow one, that eventually Gustav Brunner did the first ever female mold carbon chassis for when they had the BMW turbo engine. But you could also be meaning the ATS that Carlo Chiti built for the 1963 Formula One season. It was a diabolical car in which, in order to change gear ratios, you had to take the engine out. Phil Hill and Giancarlo Baghetti went absolutely nowhere in it. Do you mean that ATS? Or another ATS? Maybe there's a third ATS out there. Okay. Will I Am says, Jason Commissar's video on Ferdinand Piëch is a must-watch for petrol heads. That guy was something else. Yeah, he was. It was very funny, as Brian said. But the whole Porsche thing is just this amazing story, isn't it? When you think about Porsche designing the Auto Union Formula One car, that was all Porsche. You can consider the footprint they've got in Formula One over the years. But I still think it's amazing that the only reason Ron Dennis managed to persuade Mansour Ojeh to pay for the design and build of the V8 Porsche Formula One engine that won all those world championships, turbo, was by telling Mansour not only that he would be on the cam covers and be the tag Porsche engine, but there would be money coming back, because obviously this engine had huge application in helicopters, and that they'd be making a fortune from a lot of defense budgets from various countries around the world selling this engine, this tag Porsche Formula One engine, as a helicopter engine. And Mansour said, right, okay, in that case, I'll do it. I don't remember any helicopters ever being powered by that engine. But anyway, Ron was pretty good, wasn't he? Okay. So we're saying that Shane van Gisbergen is too old and too heavy to get a shot in Formula One. Yeah, sad. Zilich would need to change career paths now to get a shot in Formula One. Well, yeah, of course. I wasn't being serious. I just think it's kind of a nice gesture, though, to see them, wouldn't it? Just going out. Dave McFarlane. Hi, Peter. Thanks for your amazing work. What do you think that Théo Pourchaire's Formula One career is over before it really started? What would he need to do now to get in? I don't know. I mean, this is one of the banes of my life. Not only Théo, but, of course, Freddie Vesti as well, and lots of others. And it's just terrible how these Formula One academies and teams sign up all these drivers, as was always going to happen, because that's the only way the driver management system can really work in Formula One, because the power is with the teams, as distinct with companies like IMG or Octagon in other sports, where the power isn't with the teams, because there are no teams, but in Formula One it has to be the teams. But at least do a decent job for these guys. And they haven't. Now, what is the point of having Théo Pourchaire as your reserve driver and then not signing him when there's a vacancy in the team to race? What's he done wrong? The guy's a Formula 2 champion. Okay, so is Gabriel Bortoleto, but Théo Pourchaire was too. And now it's a terrible thing. And same with Fred Vesti, who's very, very good. Short corner driver, absolutely, no question. But, no chance. David Valsecchi, never given a chance. Formula 2 champion. Wow, Zilich is only 18 years old. He comes over as like 25, 26, mature, cool. Yeah, he's very good, eh? Well, there you go, new star. Well. Don't sign a Sauber or a McLaren driver contract is all I can say to Connor Zilich. Yeah, Will I Am says it's a travesty that two recent Formula 2 champions don't have full-time seats in Formula 1. What's the point of the feeder series? Well, it's not a feeder series for Formula 1. It's a money-making operation for the Bernie business model, which Liberty then adopted, and they haven't changed anything. I was hoping they would really change the way Formula 2 and Formula 3 was handled, but they haven't. They sort of own it in terms of the Formula 1 package, but they don't do anything with it. There should be a proper budget there for the winner to get a drive, but that doesn't happen, and it's wrong. They're not getting respect, as you say, Emmy Edmonds. Yeah, totally. Oh, okay, I know what happened now. I showed pictures without my audio. What a mistake. Typical. We don't hear you in the photos. Okay, and you know what? It's difficult to do that retrospectively. I put up these still pictures. Let me see if I can do it now. I'll tell you, I'm going to do it for one. It's all Kevin Bartlett stuff, wasn't it? Okay, I'm going to do this again because it was such a good thing. Now, okay, here's one picture I was talking about, which you didn't hear me talking about. This was the picture of, I ostensibly had it up for Peter Sutcliffe, who is the tallest in the middle of the picture there with the dark hair. He owned the GT40 that Brian Redman drove in his first appearance at the Nürburgring. Now, Peter Sutcliffe is in that picture now, and it's an interesting picture because there's Frank Maddich to his right, and they won the Surfers Paradise 6-hour race in 1966 in the GT40 that Brian then drove at Nürburgring. Then you got Jackie Stewart, and behind him Andy Buchanan, who finished second in the David Mackay Scuderia Veloci Ferrari 250 LM. And they eventually won that race when Mackay protested the lap charting. And by the time he went to the stewards, Peter Sutcliffe had already left the country and couldn't fight back. Frank Maddich always felt that they did win it and that the protest was not correct. But because they weren't there to defend it, or Peter Sutcliffe wasn't, Jackie found out that he had won that race by the time he got back to Europe. So that was the only race he ever won in a Ferrari. But I've also got this picture here because there's Kevin Bartlett, bottom right, in the unzipped dark jacket. One of my favourite drivers. And he is still around, and there he is. And I'm going to have to do this picture now. I'm going to do the same thing with the audio. 1 second. And there's KB in Macau this year, just a week or so ago. Still looking good, probably out there helping his mates. Great racing driver, and no reason for me to be putting that up other than I really rated him and still do. Fabulous driver. And I think the bits where I was showing the pictures, the audio would have come through on that, Kevin Bartlett. Now I'm going to do this one. This is the Targa. So this is the Targa 66 promotion. This is one of the two clubs that Brian Redman's very involved with. And as you can see, the next one's February 14th, 15th, 16th, 2025. Get there if you can. Get your Track Ninja. Get over there, and have a lot of fun driving, watching, talking to Brian, whatever. And the reason it's called Targa 66, I think I've mentioned, is because the Targa means a lot to Brian. He won that race in 70 in the 9083, and 66 was his racing number when he was driving the Chaparral prepared, Jim Hall prepared Formula 5000 Lola that won 3 SCCA championships. So that number means a lot to him. So there you go. That's what that one's all about. And then I think so this is eagle-eyed viewers may have seen that was me in the GT40 in the video. And the reason that I had that picture is because that Sutcliffe GT40, which is actually in the poster in the background there, that won that race, then went to the Sydney Motor Show in 66 for 3 days, straight after the race at Surfers Paradise. And Jeff Sykes of the AARC, where I used to hang out during my school holidays, said, Peter, would you like to look after that car on the stand for the next 3 days? And I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen a GT40 in my life before. And there I am in my school uniform, pretending to drive the GT40, looking very serious, as you can see. Is there anything else I'd got wrong on all of this? I think that's about it. So the reason all that happens is because there's so many things to think about on this stuff. Annoyingly, when you decide to bring in a still picture or a video, you bring in the picture and you size it all up and everything's fine. And then you've also then got to make sure that it's also going through the same audio system as I'm using now. You would imagine it would all just be seamless and would just go in, but you've got to do that hand thing every time. I'm really sorry again. I was thinking, I'm going to get this stream perfect technically. Yeah, fat chance. Anyway, a few more questions. Thanks for pointing all that out. Yeah, talking about Go Ugo. Yeah, he's good, isn't he? He's very good, this guy. We need to watch him. Uma Siddiqui. What do you think of Leclerc? Is he as good as Max? I think he's in the same class as Max. He's a short corner, early turn in, very, very efficient manager of dynamic weights, very self-critical, more emotional than Max. He's very intelligent, very humane, lovely guy. And he's lived longer in his racing career with quite an emotionally charged political team, unlike Red Bull Racing, which is very systematic and just gets on with it. Ferrari is a different environment altogether, and I think that's possibly coloured some of his confidence. But in general, I think he's right up there. He's one of the best 3 drivers in the world, alongside Max and Lewis Hamilton. So there you go. So a few more questions. Okole-san, hi Peter. What would be the penalty if a fast driver cut the Monaco chicane and overtook a driver or two and then got a lead higher than a 10 to 20 second penalty? It's a good point, isn't it? Because that sort of thing really needs to be more than just a race time thing. It really, you make a good point, because he could be more than that. And, he needs to be given a stop go or something, doesn't he? To stop that happening. One thing I've never really understood, and maybe somebody can tell me about this, but if you're leading the race and you've got a guy 2 seconds behind and you brake too late into a corner and you run wide and you go through the runoff area and you rejoin in front of that car still, what is the situation then? Has nothing happened because you haven't gained an advantage because you had the advantage anyway? Or what? I mean, you could argue that I do argue it's a very grey rule, because maybe the reason he went off is because his tyres are completely destroyed and his front brakes are completely destroyed, and the only way he can brake as late as he can to stop the guy passing him is to go into a situation where he's got to go down the escape road and then he can rejoin in front of him. But you could argue that's unfair, because he should be driving on the racetrack with the race car that he's got. So how do they judge that? How does that work? I've always thought that was a really odd thing. And I remember Nick Yellerly, he did a World Series race at Ricard once, and he was in that situation. He was leading, and it was semi-wet, and the back chicane, he went straight on or did something and rejoined in front. And then he thought, I don't know what to do here. I better give the position to the guy behind me. And he did. It's a funny thing, that, isn't it? Yeah, that Death Snarf is saying drive-through penalty. I'm saying stop, go. But same thing, really, isn't it? Symptomatic, CNC-tomatic. Okay. That would be a company that Gene Haas would like, I think. Peter, who do you think will win the Inter-Ferrari battle in 25? You mean the intra-Ferrari battle? I think you mean. Inter means there are 2 Ferrari teams, but no, intra. I think if it's a good car, Charles. If it's a bad car, who cares, Stream gone? No? Stream hasn't gone? It's frozen for me, no? iRacing Aussie. Dear Peter, love your streams, mate. Can you recount the media fanfare of Mansell's first Ferrari season in '89, and was he the driver of the year? I'm sure that other drivers would disagree with that, wouldn't they? Gerhard Berger for a start. And he didn't always have great races. I mean, yeah, fabulous drive in Hungary, amazing win in Brazil. And he was always quick if you wanted to look at what he was doing, but he had a massive number of problems as well, didn't he, with the electronics on the car, as predicted. So, yeah, I mean, I think he just drove as well as he always drives, Nigel. I'm as you know, I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I'm just truly in awe of his talent, because a fan is too light a word to use. I'm just in awe of his talent. And I think in 89, he was as good as he always was. And just he was superb in 88 in that active Judd car, but he'd had no chance to show it. But he absolutely drove to the limit of the car all the time. Obviously, it was in passive form, overnight change, when he finished second at the British Grand Prix. But that was the same. He couldn't have done that if he hadn't been driving at the absolute limit in the build-up to that race. 89, he was excellent. 90, he was excellent. 91, he was excellent. He was always excellent. Okay, I think we're getting to the Volts. Odd question. Have you heard of Shane van Gisbergen? Do you think he would have had the natural ability to make it in Formula One? I have heard of him, of course. And I do watch Aussie V8s periodically. I was watching from Adelaide, actually, on the weekend. I think a lot of drivers out there could make it in Formula One. Depends what you mean by make it, but I think they could all do what... I think they could all be midfield in a midfield car, because the learning techniques are so good now. And if you've got a lot of natural talent, you can adapt reasonably well. And I'm sure he's one guy that probably did have that talent. And we're seeing that in America now in IndyCar as well, from guys coming over from Aussie V8s. And there's a lot of talent there, no question about it. The real question is, how good are they? The Max Charles Lewis level, or are they the Yuki Tsunoda Liam Lawson level? That's the question. And I think if you'd put him in a Toro Rosso on a driver program and he'd got a race drive and done a lot of testing, I think he'd be right up there. Yeah, definitely. Hi Peter, what are your thoughts on GP3 compared to Formula 4? Well, I always liked series that are not part of the, F1 package and not controlled by all that stuff and ridiculously expensive spares and all the common parts they have to use. I much prefer real categories of racing. I'm not saying Formula 4 necessarily falls into that category at all, but it's a little bit freer in a couple of areas, and it's not a complete rip-off. That's, I think, I'm always nervous of formulae where you've got to buy through one central bureau, if you like, and the markup and all that. And nothing's ever equal anyway. And a lot of the parts that fail in F2 and F3 cars today, all the teams could design and get things made much more efficiently, but they're not allowed to. They just have to go to this central supply and with the markup. Whereas, so I'm not a fan of that, I've got to say. Peter Sutcliffe, this guy's DB Cooper. What a ridiculous question. And you never heard of Peter Sutcliffe, the long distance driver. He's still with us too. I think a very, very good long distance driver, and he's had some great cars over the years. So works now, but only on the left side. The audio fine for me. Oh, I know what's going on with that audio. I'll tell you something else. Here we go. And I'm going to sign off now because it's been too long, and I'm going to go. I'm hungry now as well. And I've got to go. What I didn't do in that audio, when I put it in for the still pictures, you then have to do another step, and you have to take it from mono. You have to put it into mono so you hear it in both things. So I'm really sorry about that. None of this will happen again, and I'll do another live stream. Or maybe I'll just follow advice of a few mates and never import any pictures or any video. And just, video is okay. It's the still pictures. You've got to think of so many things. I'm not going to do that again, I think, because this works all right, isn't it, hopefully. So what I didn't do was put it from stereo to mono. Another thing. So there we are. Lots of messes again. But anyway, hopefully there were parts of it that were enjoyable. And we had a lot of fun. I did anyway. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks to Jetcraft, Track Ninja, and to OEM Exclusive for your support, none of which we are doing. I'm so tired I am now. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without your support. Thank you very much. And don't forget to look in the description below this video, which I will do a bit later on today, giving you all the details of Brian's various days that he can do, that you can do with Brian, really. Lovely club days and stuff. And take your Track Ninja with you as well. Have fun. So there we are. All a bit messy at the end, but we got there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll do another love. I don't know. We've got triple header coming up now, isn't it? I can't even get my head around that one, let alone 3 heads. So I'll be back doing the videos from Vegas. Let's see what happens there. Take care. See you soon.